Okay, let's start the meeting. It's 5:34 on June 11th. Madam City Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Mayor Kelly Krebs.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Robert Parkhurst.
Present.
Councilmember Edward Garcia.
Here.
Councilmember Jean Goss.
Here.
And Councilmember Christine Lowe.
Present.
Madam Mayor, all members are in today.
Great, and I will be leading tonight, so if you could stand and face the flag if you're able. Ready, begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm a little ahead of myself, but I was going to just basically welcome summer because we finally have sun and we're close to the equinox. I found a great quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. I don't know what preceded it, whether it was, yay summer, but it sounds like it. It is live in the sunshine, swim in the sea, drink in the wild air, which I just found so liberating. But then the mom in me said, well, we probably need some parameters around this, right? So live in the sunshine, sun safety, wear your sunscreen, limit exercise on hot days, watch for signs of heat stress, muscle pain, heavy sweating, weakness, nausea, confusion, rapid pulse. Then we're gonna swim in the sea, so water safety. So we should stay hydrated, know the signs of drowning. This is something I learned a couple years ago that not everybody knows, that in the movies, we see pictures of people, or depictions of people drowning, and they're flailing about and causing all sorts of commotion. And in real life, for most instances, especially with kids, it's not like that. It's very peaceful. It's just the kid bobbing up and down, and you might not even know if there's a pool full of kids who's in distress. So that's it was a really eye-opening thing for me as a mom. And so one of the things I saw to sort of test that is if you think someone's in trouble, you look at them and say, are you okay? And if they can't answer you or they sort of just look at you, then you really need to get them out of the pool. So I thought that was a really good tip that I didn't know until relatively recently. And then given our last meeting and our Vector award to our local teacher, you should keep your yard clear of standing water to reduce the mosquito population. And then the last, drink in the wild air. Unfortunately, I think our air in the summer is actually not so, it's wild in the bad sense, right? We often have the smog increase, so obviously try to stay indoors on days with unhealthy air quality. Don't contribute to our poor air quality, so that means, among other things, no fireworks on the 4th of July or ever. And I also threw in that, because this was something I learned today, that while we increase our air travel in the summer, apparently turbulence also increases in the summer because it occurs often on warm days when the sun heats the surface of the earth unevenly. So I guess the tip there is to keep your seatbelt fastened at all times. So enjoy the summer safely, and I guess I should plug this because it also fits into my public safety themed State of the City. So it's a summer-long safety campaign, so on many topics. So summer safety first, and then look forward to the State of the City in September, where we're going to be talking about securing our future. And that is tonight's inspiration of sorts. Would anyone like to approve the meeting agenda or make any changes?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Agenda approved. Mr. City Attorney, would you like to report out from our closed session?
Thank you, Mayor. The City Council met in closed session to discuss conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation. The litigation in question is Protect Sierra Madre versus the City of Sierra Madre, case number 24 STCP 01652. And the City Council voted unanimously in closed session to sign a joint defense agreement with the two real parties in interest.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for approval of reading of resolutions and ordinances by title only?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, moving right along, we have our mayor and city council reports. Who would like to begin? It seems like we always begin on one of the ends. Who's it going to be? Thank you, Councilmember Goss.
Not a lot to report. I did go to the COG, Council of Governments meeting on the 30th, and they cover a lot of things during those meetings, but one thing really stood out. They had Julia Svetlana Juarez representing the State Insurance Office, Commissioner's Office, and she was there, and I think she's going around the state talking to people who are impacted by the problems we're having, the crisis we're having in homeowners insurance in the state. So she shared some information I wanted to just share. Came from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and I just wanted to get it on the record in case the public would like to know. If you can't get insurance, you can get a fair plan, but it's hard to get a fair plan because they're getting, quote, 1,000 fair plan requests a day, close quote. So the process is slowed down, but if you're patient, apparently you'll get in and you can get a fair plan insurance for your home. She also stated, this was news to me, that Mercury Insurance and AAA Insurance are currently writing homeowners insurance in the state of California. As you're probably aware, many others are not and are actually taking people out of insurance. She recommended that cities in the foothills become, quote, fire-wise communities. I think our fire department knows what that is, and I'd like to maybe have them sound in on that at some point in the near future. She said that fire-wise communities contribute to the insurability of homes. So apparently when you get that designation, helps you get more homes insured. And also, very interestingly, by the end of the year, the insurance office will be implementing something called a catastrophic model, and I queried her on this. And apparently, what's the upshot of this is that the model will actually focus on the history of your individual property over time instead of the surrounding community per se, so that if your property has withstood fire many times, even if your community has had problems, you will get a plus factor there, and it'll help you get insurance. That doesn't kick in until the end of the year, but that's an example of where they're trying to think a little outside of the box to solve this problem, because some of the numbers she was sharing were pretty startling about how many people are losing insurance and unable to get it. I was supposed to go to the Foothill Employment Training Consortium Policy Board yesterday. The FETC board meeting was canceled because they couldn't get a quorum, so I guess we're going to meet in September. That's my report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Would like to go next?
Mine's pretty short, too. League of Cities Division General Meeting in El Segundo at the Air Force Base, and they had a guest speaker who is Miguel Santana, the president of California Communities Foundation, and he was talking about a November ballot measure for replacing our current Los Angeles County homeless sales tax, and it would be an increase from 1/4 cent to 1/2 cent for homeless-related housing programs and services. So he was speaking to that.
Did you say the El Segundo Air Force Base?
El Segundo, was it the
I'm not sure I realized there was an Air Force Base.
Air Force Reserve? I don't remember what the whole title was, but we had to get clearance to enter, pre-clearance for 2 weeks ahead of time.
Fancy. Okay. Councilmember Garcia?
On June 6th, I attended the Senior Community Commission meeting. There was a debrief on the Older American Award for Mary Carney. I wasn't able to attend that celebration, but I think every one of the commissioners was even more impressed with her after hearing her speech and all the things that she's done in her lifetime. There's also a discussion regarding the community yard sale that's coming up, which is also will be the symposium on aging happening at the band shell from being hosted by Kensington on the same day. And just a reminder that that community yard sale, I'm sure our mayor will remind us of the dates and times, but it is there to support the Senior Community Commission. And finally, since they only meet once a month, we had to say goodbye to Patrick Holland and Anita Thompson, as they are the two that are coming off the Senior Community Commission and leaving 2 vacancies. So they will both be sorely missed. If you know that commission, every single one of the 5 really contributes a lot, and Patrick and Anita especially contributed a lot. So a couple hours later on June 6th, I attended the Planning Commission meeting. And there was a pretty, looked like a dense agenda, but the commission got through it pretty quick. There was a design review permit that was approved. It was an amended, they sent some amendments back to the applicant, and they came back satisfied, more than satisfied. I think the entire commission was very happy with what they saw on the improvements on that design review. Also, the Twycross House on South Baldwin, just south of the post office, a couple houses, that older Craftsman. They approved a certificate of appropriateness and approved the roofing materials and the replacing of a roof that will go on that building as well. Do you have a question on that?
That's the one that
Madam?
just got sold?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We had a tree removed from the parkway recently too.
Two.
So if you see that roof, you'll understand why they're going to update it, and they're going to use some very fire safe and energy efficient roofing materials for that structure. And they also got to talk about colors, which was interesting. But they, instead of picking colors, they said we don't want black. Everything else is okay. So that was fun to hear. And then finally, and I was very interested in this, and I think the entire council would be. There was a discussion regarding the pre-approved plans and designs for accessory dwelling units. So it was a very well-led discussion by Chair Dennison. A lot of ideas. There was a good presentation by one of our newest staff members in planning and preservation, and I'm assuming we're going to be hearing something not very soon, but soon enough regarding the pre-approved plans and designs for ADUs.
Great.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
So last week on Thursday, so that would be, what was that, June 5th, the Clean Power Alliance had its board meeting, and at the board meeting, we signed 2 power purchase agreements for a total of, they're all battery storage, 48 megawatts of generation, which would power 24,000 Southern California homes and avoids 82 million pounds of greenhouse gas emissions. And these are the 45th and 46th long-term contracts that the Clean Power Alliance has signed. So pretty exciting, and that's all I have to report.
I think this, similar to other folks, not a lot on our outside meeting agendas this last couple of weeks, but I did attend with Mayor Pro Tem, actually, the British Home June Fair, which was lovely as always. I joked in my remarks that we'd brought some, authentic English weather because it was kind of a little misty and a little, not quite rainy, but almost rainy that morning, but then it did clear up and it was a beautiful day. So it was a great event, as always. It's just an amazing treasure in our town, which I really feel is kind of a hidden treasure. I said something to one of the staff members about, I'm sure there's a waiting list, at the length of my arm, and she said, no, actually, there's not. So it really is a hidden gem. So I appreciate their invitation to speak and open their fair, and appreciate their community participation. And then in terms of the official announcements, as previewed, we do have our community yard sale this Saturday, the 15th, at Memorial Park at 8 a.m., organized by our Sierra Madre Senior Commission. They will have everything from antiques, vintage clothing, kitchenware, to furniture. Apparently, we are supposed to come for the goods and stay for the live music. The Kensington will be providing the live music in connection with their Symposium on Aging, which will occur that same day, Memorial Park, at 10:30 a.m. So some nice cross-marketing there. Stop and shop and then learn something about aging, or vice versa. And then on Monday the 24th, the fire department will be having their town hall meeting from 6 to 7 here in Chambers, and they are requesting insight from the community as they are developing their comprehensive master plan. And then, as always, we are looking to fill 3 commission vacancies. I can't wait till we fill them. 2 for the Senior Community Commission and 1 for the Planning Commission. So those terms do begin on July 1st, and please apply with the City Clerk's office. And those are the announcements.
Is there a blood drive tomorrow for the library as well?
I believe
Oh,
so,
we have
yes.
our
And the librarian might be coming to,
Give some of those now. Okay.
I suspect, yes. So seems like we have a relatively captive audience, so I might skip the public participation code of conduct and go right to public comment on items not on the agenda.
Madam Mayor, the first speaker card is from Rob Stockley.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for calling me up. I saw that you have on your agenda a library project update, and so I wanted to also take this occasion to kind of update you on the Sierra Madre Library Foundation. Before I get too far into my comments, I want to thank Councilmember Lowe for a donation to the foundation. It's very much appreciated. I can tell you that I will be back asking all of you for more money, so start saving your monthly stipends up and be prepared for that. Just to remind you and the community, the role of the foundation is to raise funds to supplement the Friends of the Library's substantial $695,000 contribution and the $100,000 allotment from the Day Family Trust to furnish and equip the library once it's completed in 2026. During the design phase, which we've been involved in, of this renovation, the foundation board has been expanded with exceptional community members, and I do mean exceptional. And we've been planning and preparing for the campaign. We haven't rolled out the campaign, and I'll explain that in a moment. So the first thing that has to happen is there has to be a building project that's really there. The contract needs to be signed, and there needs to be a commitment of the funds that we received from the state grant. So the kickoff of the campaign will coincide with that signing and the groundbreaking. And so the board's closely following the progress of this process, which, as you're well aware, has been extended, and it's condensing the amount of time that we have to actually complete the project. And that's really one of the things that I wanted to express as a concern. So I strongly encourage the City Council to closely monitor the project so that the community gets full advantage of the $10 million state grant that must be expended by the end of March 2026. Please bear in mind that furniture, fixtures, and equipment will need to be ordered well in advance. So we need to be commencing and gathering our funds so that we can start making commitments so that the city can go out and order the things that they need. So with that said, the current start date, groundbreaking, I think is now looking to be more like September of this year. That only provides a 19-month period for construction. And you were talking about the planning department and things that they do and getting into old houses. I guarantee getting into a 70-year-old public building, there are going to be some surprises. So one suggestion I wanted to offer is that in the future, when you have presentations about the library, to make it a discussion item as opposed to a presentation, so that you can have an exchange with the community about what's going on and keeping everybody apprised. We're very hopeful that we can actually do this, that we can go out and we can raise the money that the library is going to need to equip the library so that we have the best library possible. But we'd like as much time as we can possibly get to run that campaign. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Stockley.
Madam Mayor, Layla Regan.
Hi, Mayor Krebs, Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, and our Honorable City Council. I'm here to tell you that we had our summer reading kickoff on Saturday. We had a large amount of attendees of families of all ages. We had Library Trustee Diane Sands face painting bookworms, so a few of us got bookworms. that day, and our summer reading program is off to a great start. We do have a blood drive tomorrow. We are able to take walk-ins in the library parking lot in the afternoons after around 2 o'clock. And we're really excited about that. It's for the Children's Hospital of LA. And we also have a town hall. We have 2 town hall meetings coming up. The first will be this Thursday at 6:30 p.m. right here in the City Council chambers. And the second will be Saturday, June 22nd at 2 o'clock p.m. right here in the City Council chambers. And those are less so about the building, but more about the direction that we want to see the public would like to see the library go. We want to make sure that while we are getting a renovated building, that we are still adhering to the needs of the public and making sure that if there is a need, that we are making sure that we meet it. So that's more along the lines of what those town hall meetings are, although I'm sure I will field quite a few questions about the building, but hopefully we can stay on task as far as how the library can serve the public the best. Other than that, we had our first walk This Is How We Roll event today. So if anyone would like to join us on Tuesdays at 9 o'clock a.m. in front of the library, we just walk around Memorial Park and talk about what we're reading. It's very delightful. We did get to have a city employee member, Ted, our new community services manager, joined us. So we got to chat with him about some events, and that was really, really nice today. Otherwise, please check out our calendar for more summer reading program events, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have no other speaker cards, Madam Mayor, and nor did we receive any emails for this topic.
Thank you. Okay, I think we do have, following in our theme, a presentation from Director Yanez on the Library Improvement Project. This is very well timed.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I will not be speaking today. Actually, what I'll be doing is introducing Natalie Hazard, who is with Vertex. She is the project manager for the library project.
Great,
Natalie?
thank you.
Hi there.
Great, thank you.
So there was a time that we talked about schedule and it was kind of compact and brief, but I can tell you we went into pre-qualification. We went out and we published in the newspaper in 2 other publications that are online, and we also did the website. So we did all 4 of those, and we've already gotten some responses. That process goes from this Saturday that just passed till the 25th, okay? After that, we go through a process of qualifying and scoring them all. So we're gonna be doing that, and then after that, if we find anyone who's not qualified and responsible, then they have an appeal period. If no one appeals, those 10 days get carved off the schedule I'm gonna discuss, okay? So we advertise for bidding on 7/22, okay? The bid walk for the contractors and the team is to go through the entire building to understand what Sierra Madre is going to keep, what the GC is responsible for, and going through all of that, and that's the bid walk. The bid close is 8:30, that's the Friday before Labor Day. We might move that up to the 29th because the city is closed on the 30th. The contract approval process will be 9/12, and the council will be 9/19. So we have about a week in there to get the contract in shape, so every party is agreeing on that contract. Mobilization, this is very important because this is where it comes in. Mobilization will be 9/27. I know groundbreaking, they want to do earlier, so we're going to do groundbreaking on 9/12. As soon as the contract is kind of in motion, we can do a groundbreaking because we want the GC to actually be there. Okay, construction start. Now remember, we could move this up 10 to 15 days depending on that appeal process. Is construction start date of 10/18. Okay, so don't get scared by that. We're only in a 12-month period of construction. So the 19 that he mentioned, we're in good shape. 12 months is what we're expecting. We're going to keep working for that. GCs are pretty confident, any that I've spoken to, they're already pretty confident that in 12 months that could be done. Okay, I pre-spoke to some of the contractors, kind of let them know the interest level. Construction end is 10/23/25. as I mentioned to Jose earlier today. So that is what the schedule is. If you have any questions about this, please ask away, because I have more details here and I don't want to go through every single one, but I want to be direct with you about everything that we have on our plan.
Do we have questions? Councilmember Garcia.
So you mentioned July 22nd, that's when the bidding opens. Is that also the bid walk, or is the bid walk a different?
Bid walk is a different day. The bid walk is a week in. It gives the contractors a chance to look at the documents and decide what they have as questions that they want to see on site. So you give them about 5 to 7 days.
So with the RFQ, they're not seeing documents, they're just kind of, they're
RFQ,
putting their
then-
name forward and
No,
you're gonna
there's
go
a whole,
through.
there's a whole questionnaire process that's through labor relations, through the state of California, that we're using that questionnaire. It goes through references, it goes through subcontractors, it goes through everything. It's a very detailed document that Arnolfo has a copy of. That document has been vetted through everybody here. I know that this is really important, so that is the process that Vertex is going to be reviewing with TSK and with Arnolfo. So as we come in, we're gonna be scoring all these contractors together. That way, we're all getting input. So the city is getting input, the architect who's designed it is getting input, and so is Vertex from our experiences. So we have a team of 5 people at Vertex that we're trying to maintain as the project team that is involved in this.
And you're confident that between June 25th and July 22nd, you'll have enough time to go through all and pre-qualify and
Yes.
get that completed?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do have confidence in that.
And your 12-month building estimate, that takes into consideration the assumption of bad weather and
Yes.
all those
Yes.
things? Because we've had some delays in our play structure at the park, and obviously
Yes.
residents get concerned, and so does the council, but we want to make sure that
The
contingencies are
big
built
thing
in.
is to get into building envelope, and then bad weather doesn't have a play in it. So we're gonna get building envelope secured, and then the weather will not affect the schedule.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So to follow up on that, if the groundbreaking's 9/12, you're going right into the rainy season, how are you gonna get the building envelope? Like, you're talking about getting the building envelope secured, but there could be delays getting the building envelope completed during the rainy season. Is
While
that-
we're grading and doing that will not affect how we're doing this. There's going to be demo. There's going to be things that are gonna be in play before we even get into the construction. So there is earth movement before we actually get into building construction. So we'll get into that earth movement and the demo first.
Can you tell me what mobilization is?
Contractors have to kind of get all the subs in line, have to get everyone on track of how they want the schedule, because they'll provide a schedule in that mobilization. That schedule is what we're gonna be working off of, but they have to get that all in line. Okay, so mobilization could be equipment, mobilization might be a trailer, mobilization might be just different things that they need to have on site at all time, temp power, things like that. So
Great.
that's not really construction, it's preparing.
And to Mr. Stockley's question, you know, I mean, it's a 50-year-old building, or more older than 50 years, and you open it up and you're going to find all kinds of surprises. How does that fit with the schedule here? You've got enough time in there to deal with what you expect the worst-case scenario is?
So lead and asbestos is a big one, and tomorrow at 9 o'clock, I'm meeting with a lead and asbestos survey. We're gonna have that done way before the construction. We're gonna have abatement done way before construction. So that is probably the biggest concern with the age of this building, and we'll have that taken care of. We're even doing a record of survey for the property line of this property. There is none on record. So we're going to have that. We don't need a full ALTA survey. The civil has done their work, but we do need the boundary lines. So we're gonna take care of that also.
Any other questions?
I just want to follow up on communication. I just want to get reassured that, and by the way, very, very happy that we have you on board. Really helps our staff
We're
free up
very
some
happy to
time.
be here.
But as far as communication with you, city staff, and TSK, has that been really good up until this point?
It's been excellent. Today I came in, there's a little desk outside Arnolfo's office. The staff knows I'm here. I'm working from there. I'll be on site. You know, I was on site last week. I'm on site today. We were there as a team, and tomorrow I'll be there for lead and asbestos. So I'm on site, whether you see the earth moving or not, or building.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yes.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Welcome. I was going to ask if the foundation has any questions.
Oh, yes, sure.
Where is it? There you go. Okay, I just
Thank
want to
you.
make sure I answered your questions. Okay, wonderful,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Light on presentations tonight. Moving on to consent. Madam City Clerk, would you please read the consent items?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Before the City Council this evening are 4 items for consideration. Consent item A is consideration of Resolution 24-32, approving certain demands. It is recommended that the City Council approve Resolution 24-32. Consent item B is a recommendation to approve the notice of completion for the fiscal year 2023-2024 water main replacement project, and it is recommended that the City Council approve the notice of completion for this project and direct staff to file the notice with the Los Angeles County Clerk's Office. Consent item C is a consideration of Resolution 24-38, the City of Sierra Madre establishing the annual special taxes for Community Facilities District Number 1 and annual assessments for East Bonita Avenue Sewer Improvement and Miramonte Avenue Sewer Improvement, and levying special taxes and assessments for the fiscal year 2024 and 2020 into 2025. And it is recommended that City Council adopt Resolution 24-38. And lastly, consent item D is the City Treasurer's Report for the quarter ending March 31st, 2024, and it is recommended that the City Council receive and file this report. That concludes my presentation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. I will ask council if they have any questions on any of the consent items. A, B.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
So on the last page of the staff report, first of all, I want to say I was thrilled to see it came in under budget, but there was a change order for $10,800, and it says see attached. I just want to make sure that we did our due diligence and that change order that was kind of pre-approved through the council was vetted and it was appropriate, and maybe a little bit of what that $10,800 was for.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor, Council. Yes, the attached change order was approved. It was for some materials on some hydrant laterals and some extension of piping material that they had laid down. It was approved. It fell under the $350,350. I remember that number just because it was unique. Yes, we did vet it. We did see it through, and the process was done in my opinion, was done in a very good condition. So,
Great.
Great.
any other questions?
Thank you, Superintendent.
Any other questions? Great, thank you very much. All right, was that B or was that C?
B, yeah.
So how about C,
Madam Mayor?
please?
So I noticed on the appendix, the Exhibit A of item C, that the amounts for the different assessment districts are quite different. And I was just curious, is that typical? I mean, we've got 238 for one district and almost 1,300 for another. And just kind of would like to understand that a little bit better. I'm sorry, it's 1,300 and I think 500, so it's a factor of about 2.
Good evening, yes, sir. There is, based on the size of the districts, amount of parcels, that takes into consideration, sir.
And wasn't there something different, like the one on one Carter, there was a something unique about it, like a catch basin or something?
Correct, sir. Yes.
So,
that-
so the sewer districts, they pay based on the infrastructure they have to maintain, is that right?
Correct, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just maybe it's more curiosity, and I don't want to make the meeting too much longer, but just to bounce off what Mayor Pro Tem asked regarding one Carter. If I recall, didn't we deed the catch basin to the county? And so if we did that, are these just for maintaining kind of the area that goes to the catch basin, or what is this covering?
That you hit the nail on the head. You hit the nail on the head, sir. That is exactly what I would, yes.
All right, thank you. I answered my own question.
Councilmember Garcia, I can expand a little bit. So, one is for the storm drains streets, and what we deeded to the county was for the infrastructure that holds back water, the not catch basin, but debris basin.
Okay, debris basin. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, and then item D, the treasurer's report.
You looked at me.
Well, because you always have a question on this.
No.
Okay.
I know, our city treasurer is here, and I'm tempted just to get him up because I like him so much to hear him say something, but,
I actually had a comment on this, so if no one else has questions. I just wanted to thank our treasurer for his service and encourage him to continue his service, given all the great job that he's done.
here.
All right, any public comment on consent? I know we don't have any emails.
That is correct, and there are no speaker cards either.
Okay, any discussion from the council? A motion?
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. All right, so we make up for our lack of presentations with our plethora of public hearings. The first is the Landscaping and Lighting Maintenance Assessment District, public hearing. So I think Director Inez is going to present on this.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I come to you here tonight to ask for approval on this. I do not have a presentation or anything to present. This is an annual assessment that is brought to the council. That's what we are doing here this evening. That is my presentation, Madam.
Thank you.
I like it.
Well, just as a reminder, we did have the adoption of the resolution to levy and confirm the report for the district last meeting, and so this is the step 2 of the two-step process. So does anybody have any questions? Okay, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I will open the public hearing. I know, again, we have had no emails, and I'm not seeing a rush to the podium.
No speaker cards either.
Okay, maybe the quickest public hearing on record. Anybody have discussion? All right, well then I would I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt Resolution 2437, confirming the assessment and ordering the levy for fiscal year 2024 to 2025 for the Downtown Landscaping and Lighting Maintenance Assessment District.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion passes. All right, the meat of the evening, I believe, well, one of the two, public hearing regarding the establishing our fee schedule. I believe our finance director.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. So I'll be introducing Tony, but I just want to give an introduction. So one of the city's strategic goals is to maintain fiscal sustainability, and as a part of that, the city conducted a city-wide user fee study. And the study reviews all user fees to ensure appropriate levels of cost recovery. And cost recovery also ensures there's appropriate funding to continue providing those services. So today with us is Tony with Weldon Financial Services. And we also have all departments available for any questions at the end.
And can you remind us how long it's been since we've done this survey?
The last time we updated our fees was 2010.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Tony Thrash with Weldon Financial. I'm about to give a presentation you've seen before within the study session, but so I'll try to go through it a little quicker, right? I won't be as quick as the last public hearing, but I'll try to go through it a little quicker.
That would be difficult.
So I'll start off with what are user fees. These are private benefit services being requested from from the public or for a specific use. It is operational cost recovery of service, so state law requires that fees be set at maximum of the full cost of providing those services. We are not including impact fees, utility rates, taxes, or any other sort of what you would call a fee or charge. So why update our user fees? Well, the predominant amount of cost that's involved with these services is within your general fund, and so if you aren't funding the private benefits through fees, then it can have an impact on your general fund dollars to be able to support general benefit type services or initiatives, things of that nature. Prolonged deficiency in cost recovery can also affect your service quality as well. Through same kind of thought process, right? And just overall, it's important for you to know what the cost of your services are so you can set a reasonable fee according to state law. And if you don't want to charge full cost, you can make that policy decision as well. So within the fee study, there's two primary objectives. First is to update the fee schedules. It's been a while since you've had a fee study done, right? Make sure that they are right size, they fit your needs moving forward, and they make sense for how service is being provided. And then once we have the fee schedule in place, identifying what the cost of those services are, we try to use fully burdened hourly rates as much as we can to calculate the full cost of service attached to reasonable time estimates. When we can't do that, we use operational cost recovery. It's identifying a bucket of cost that provides a service and dividing it over the user base.
Can you, just before you go on, just for the lay folks, including myself, can you explain what fully burdened rates means?
Absolutely. So at its foundation, it is the personnel cost involved, right? So we have a personnel cost, and then layered on top of that is direct overhead. So that's the additional budget that the department has that they need in order to do their job. That's pens, paper, right? Any of that operational cost that's charged to them. And then on top of that, it's indirect support. So that is the central functions of the city, right? So finance, human resources, and all of that. Those are required in order for them to do their job. And so we allocate those costs to the operating departments based off of how they're receiving that support. And so when we divide that over productive hours, 1,650 is the figure that we use. It's 2,080 total workable hours in the year, and then we take out vacation and holidays and all that other time when they're not actually on the job. And about 6% of general admin time gives us 1,650 productive hours. That gives us a fully burdened hourly rate for all positions.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so once we know what the cost of service is, we compare that to what your current fees are so that we can then identify where you have current subsidy levels or where your fees are currently higher than the full cost based off of a big change in time over since 2010. And once we identify those differences, we talk with your staff and management about where to set those fees, where you might want to have cost recovery. And we'll get into that with individual fee departments as we kind of go through it. Scope of the study, most of your departments have a fee. So most of the departments are being included within the study when they do have operational cost recovery fees. This sort of, so I kind of talked about how the fully burdened hourly rates were calculated. So expenditure data, staffing structures, central service overhead, that's also calculated and inputted within there. Productive or billable hours, who's providing that support and providing time estimates through the process. As you can imagine, your departments, all the staff have to be involved at all processes so that they are reviewing the way that we're calculating things. They have to provide the time estimates and what it takes to provide the service. My background's finance. I'm not telling a planner what they're doing, right? So the entire process and the model and the calculations have to be fully vetted through staff. The summary steps of the study, right? So we'll this a little bit, but model development is where we start off, collecting a bunch of data to calculate the overhead and fully burdened hourly rates. And then once we have that model in place, we meet with the departments and go over adjustments they want to make to their schedule so it reflects service moving forward. They provide the cost and time data so we can calculate the full cost of service. And then we compare that to your current fees to identify where your cost recovery is. Adjust that cost recovery for suggested fees, create the report around it, and bring it to yourselves and the public for consideration. Now, individual departments are the slides to come. I'm going to be redundant a bit in the way I talk about these. I want to hit a few points. How were the fees calculated? What we found with the cost recovery calculations and the results of the suggested fees in the report. So administrative fees were a mixture of flat fees, the business license fees, and other fees that are set by state regulation. We used a time-based analysis to calculate the full cost of service. We did identify that there was a lot of subsidies in there, but there were subsidies in there, but we actually have the business license fees predominantly going down because we're calculating those based off full costs as opposed to them being licenses previously. So there was a question at the previous council meeting, which was, why are those fees going down more? We're calculating those based off full costs, where previously they were licenses, so they were considered more of a tax structure, right? So that's why those decreases are in there. So the average fee change would be a decrease of 37% for those.
And those are for fees in the administrative part of the organization.
Right, right, yeah. Some of these, the way that we kind of divvy up the fees are according to your fee schedule. It can be a misnomer because some of these fees involve finance, some might involve another department, but it's kind of where they reside within the schedule. And your fees are also going to be cross-departmental at times, so where you might have a planning application that involves building, planning, engineering, and utility, right? So they can all be involved with the services listed. Now for building and safety, there's a mixture of both flat fees and then there is the building permit program. So we use a time-based cost analysis for the flat fees and a program cost analysis for the building permit fees. We did find that fees are below the cost of providing them currently, and so the suggestion is an increase to 35 fees, including the building permit program. 3 fees would decrease, 9 new fees would be added, 23 fees would remain as currently set, and the average fee change would be an increase of 25% for flat fees and 57% for building permit fees. For planning, it was a time-based analysis that found that most fees are currently set below the cost of providing service. So there would be a suggested increase to 36 fees, 13 fees would decrease, 5 new fees would be added, 2 fees would change from actual cost from a flat amount, 18 fees would remain as currently set, and the average fee change would be a 15% increase. For public works, we have a time-based cost analysis that found that current fees are not currently in line with providing them. That's just a way of saying we saw changes across the board. We saw increase needed for some fees, a decrease needed based off current day for some. So an increase is suggested for 11, 19 fees would decrease, 12 fees remain as currently set, and the average fee change would be around a 4% decrease. Now for library, we did use a time-based cost analysis for those fees that are based off of the operational costs providing them. It did find that the fees are currently set below their cost. The suggested fees are an increase to 2 fees. Those are personnel fees that we are suggested in there. On all of the other 20 fees remain as currently set, and the average change would be an 8% increase to those fees. Now for community services, it's a little different. So there's a lot of usage fees in there. So under Prop 26, there is a different exclusion for those that can be set based off market factors, but we still want to make sure that the city is not earning a profit in any area. We did analysis on cost recovery and found that community services is operating around a 14% cost recovery, which seems really low, but it's not atypical. There's a lot of overhead and costs that go into it, and so when you see direct costs versus revenue, it can look a little bit rosier, but we include all supporting costs, including central services, so that's why it goes down even lower, and it's not atypical for what we see across California. And especially after or post-pandemic. Things are trying to catch up a little bit, but costs are certainly outweighing any gains in those areas. So we did a time and cost analysis on some of the fees that are purely operational cost recovery and identified an increase for 46 fees, 17 fees would decrease, 19 fees would remain as currently set, and the average fee change would be a 2% increase. For police, there was a time-based cost analysis that found that fees are currently set far below the cost of providing service. And so for theirs, we are suggesting an increase to 25 fees, 7 fees would decrease, 8 fees would remain as currently set. The average fee change would be an increase of 174%, right? Large numbers, some of them are skewing that percentage. We're essentially taking the fee change for each one, averaging it together, and that's what that is. So it's not necessarily, it's not a revenue effect, it's just a measure of kind of where things are flowing. For fire, it was a time-based cost analysis that found that current fees are set below the cost of providing them, and so the suggestion is an increase to 15 fees. 4 fees would decrease, 52 new fees would be added, but they're mostly code permits and inspections that aren't currently kind of split out and identified in your schedule. 1 fee would change from flat fee to a flat fee from actual cost. 17 fees remain as currently set, and the average fee change would be an increase of 101% for existing fees. These haven't been touched in a while, and there's been a lot of change in code and requirements from the state that haven't been represented in your current schedule. So. For utility, there's a time-based cost analysis for theirs as well. Again, utility rates, connection fees, they are not included in this. The analysis found the current fees are not set at the cost of providing them, and the suggestion is an increase to 12 fees. 11 fees would decrease, 11 fees remain as currently set, and the average fee change would be a decrease of 30%. Now, when we're talking about the fees that are going down, that is primarily the meter fees that are in there. There was a question about why the 4-inch meter fees were so much lower than they are currently. It's because the actual meter cost is not being included in there because it is an unknown factor. And so within the note of that is that the meter cost would be added on top of that, depending on what it is. So that's why it shows a huge decrease there. That's the only reason why. We know the cost of the other meter sizes below that. Okay, so as a wrap up, general standard private benefit services mean that you generally should charge 100% cost recovery so you can free up your general tax dollars and unobligated funds to pay for, I can't talk right now, general benefit services. There we go. In certain situations, I'll say this, I've never worked with a city that does not have some level of subsidy in their fees, and that is also in the case in here as well. We try to maximize more cost recovery in community development type applications, but for things like community services and library and things where you would want them like appeals, there is subsidies in there being recommended as well. And so you're kind of in line exactly with what we see typically as well. We do recommend the city use an inflation factor, either CPI, MOU, or recalculation of hourly rates or something of this sort to keep up with costs in years in which you don't do a fee study so you don't see these big jumps, right, and big changes. The recommendation is typically every 5 years to get a look at the full cost recovery. Okay, I'm here to answer any questions, and as mentioned, staff is also here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions before discussion? Sure. Yes, please.
So regarding police fees and the CCW fee, that's something that came to us recently, and I know we discussed it in the study session. Are you seeing with other municipalities or cities that there is a fairly large subsidy? When you're talking, I'm talking about cities of our size or similar size, not talking about like the LA Sheriff's Department. Is there usually a pretty large subsidy for that?
Yeah, the release of this process back to the cities from the county you've seen some differing levels of kind of what fees end up getting set, but we are seeing a lot of subsidy in there just because there is a it's kind of difference between, it does take a lot of time and effort in order to do that process, but at the same time, there is a lot of pressure not to charge too much because you're seeing certain groups go after those and identify those. So the recommendation is to start off at a kind of even measure where you're at, and then you can go from there, depending on kind of your appetite to do further increases or what, say, certain things come out in the public based off that.
Understood. And you mentioned your recommendation is to include increases based on CPI and or MOUs. That's the typical way of doing it? I think that's the way we've kind of been doing it. I was pleased to see kind of where a lot of our fees were relative to where they should be. I think we did for not having a fee study in so long, we did okay. But it was nice to kind of open everything up and see. But is that something we can do at a staff level, or is that something that you recommend we hire out when, let's say, a new MOU comes for the next 5 years for one of our bargaining units? You think staff can handle that, or is that something that's contracted generally?
So typically staff would bring forward a resolution for a % increase and identify what the new fees would be. Most often it's done as part of the budgetary process, as before the next fiscal year. So you kind of see the expenditures and the revenue side of it at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Just as a process too, were any of these, was any part of the fee study compared to our municipal codes? In other words, there are probably some codes that we would have to change because they previously state other fees or other remedies.
So a lot of the, typically what we see within the municipal code would be fines and penalties and things of that nature. Those, we did not include in here, so they haven't changed. The only one that I know of was the business license tax that was changed from a tax to a fee in, I believe, August of last year.
Other questions?
I had a couple. We had discussions in the past around building and safety fees, and we had changed the rate for appeals for, I can't remember which permits it was. Someone can help me out, but we had changed that. So the council had made decisions on some of those fees. I assume those were kept the way the council had determined them?
I'm actually gonna have to look behind me.
Non-applicant appellants.
Non-applicant appellants for housing or for
Design?
Conditional use.
was it conditional use or was it for building?
I think it was just for appeals.
Let's have our
Well,
planning,
yeah.
planning director. Yeah.
Am I making any sense tonight?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Those fees for design review appeals,
Design review.
appeal by appellant, those fees were set by City Council by resolution. So we did capture those in the user fee study, so those fees will remain the same.
Got it. Thank you.
Do you have a question?
follow-up?
No.
Okay. So then, the police fees increased substantially. Can you give us an example of some of the fees that increased and some of the ones that increased the most?
Look at traffic accident report.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, let me see if I can identify a few of these, right? So, say because there was kind of, like I said, across the board, right? So,
Can I just follow up with a specific?
Yeah.
Traffic accident report, non-injury. I'd like some explanation of that. Says the unit cost per page, $20 maximum, but the fees now moved to $638 were suggested.
so that is based off of the full cost that it takes for them to provide that service, and so the kind of recommendation that I'm talking to staff is to get full cost recovery on those. They're not related to a public records request or things of that nature, so it's more of a full cost recovery.
So who pays that? The insurance company, I would assume?
Need to,
Is that billed to an individual person?
I need to get confirmation from staff of
Yeah.
exactly who they're interacting with for that.
I'm just thinking that, we're concerned about pushback with these concealed carry permit issues. But I would imagine a lot of these might have some pushback from the public. Non-injury. I mean, was that taken into account when these rates were figured?
Let me see.
I mean, we went from 10 cents to 600.
Mm-hmm.
It was 10
I mean,
cents
that's-
period or 10 cents a page?
10 cents a page and then
But
went to
for
600.
like-
And then for a lost cell phone, it's like $300 and something dollars.
And it's like $33 maximum. So you
I mean,
get a
it's
crime
like,
report.
this is almost like unbelievable. It's hard for me to fathom how we could, either I just would like to know what was the thought about how this would be received by the people who actually have to pay it.
Or is that more like the report, like not the report you would give to insurance? Is that more the report like for a court case or something? Like, could you distinguish what the difference is?
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Pro Temp and City Council. So when you look at the fee schedule, I think what they're looking at is what it would cost overall, meaning the process of an officer taking a report, filing the report, completing the narrative, submitting it through records, etc. For a citizen to file a police report, that is free of charge. That is part of doing business. We do not charge for completing a police report at all. We do not charge an insurance company for a copy of a report. They go through a public records request, and it's 10 cents a page.
So
the
in what instance would you expect this fee to be levied?
Yeah, a traffic accident report, non-injury. Right now, we're charging 10 cents per page, but there's a $638 suggested charge.
So the suggested charge is what it would cost. So I'll give you like a hypothetical, an alarm call at a residence. It would take 2 units and a sergeant to go and hold the residents. It could be a false alarm. Probably services from an air unit or an airship from Pasadena to help out. Search of the residence. If the residence is unlocked, search of the residence, we'd probably be tied up about 45 minutes. So it would include it would encompass all of the fee or the cost for recovery of personnel and services provided. That's part of doing business. We do not charge anyone for that.
So why would we put it on our fee analysis if we're not charging? This is supposed to be for the public to see what we charge for this fee, like for that.
So the only thing we charge is 10 cents a page.
Not according to this.
Yeah, and the new fee schedule says we're gonna be charging you $638 for a crime report. We'll be charging you $423 for a lost cell phone and $638 for a traffic accident non-injury.
These are reports, not actually for,
Correct.
not for responding to the incident.
Correct, but if you needed a report,
If you, and you will, if you're involved in any kind of insurance issue.
All public requests for a report are 10 cents a page, all across the board, unless it requires anything outside of that. For example, there's a charge, I think a $5 charge to convert or transfer the information to a CD. Or if you use a flash drive, you can charge the citizen or the person requesting the public request for the flash drive. But we charge 10 cents a page.
so city manager, maybe this is for you. Does this all need to be adjusted or reworded or changed?
So I think what we're looking at, it'll be a question that's, for Wildan, I think what we're looking at here is that maybe the cost recovery fees, or what it cost us to do the actual work is in the report, but not actually what we charge our residents. So it's something that we do need to look at.
I'd have a recommendation. While we show what the full cost is, from what it sounds like, that the actual intention is not to change these fees. And so I might suggest that if you were to approve the fee schedule, that you would do so with a change being to not change the report fees.
Go ahead.
Just one clarification. The Public Records Act requires us to provide those records at 10 cents a page, if that record exists. When I saw this, I understood this to mean, and maybe I misunderstood it, I understood it to mean if we are required to generate a report, then if we're gonna generate that report, if we weren't gonna ordinarily do it, we're not gonna do it in the ordinary course of business, but now something happens, we're going to generate this report for you, we're going to charge you for it. Because it's not a record that we retain in the ordinary course of business that would be subject to a PRA request. This is something we're creating for you. Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought that's what it meant.
I think with the fees is what it would cost if full burden for personnel, services, resources, etc. Not what we're actually charging. I mean, police work, it's a course of doing business.
I guess let me phrase the question a little differently. Is it always the case that if you're gonna respond to some, what was it?
Lost cell phone.
Councilmember, it was
Lost cell phone is one of the report.
if someone, if it's a lost cell phone, is it always the case that a report will be generated?
Yes, if the citizen requests a report to be taken, yes. There's some insurance companies from cell phones that require, you could do those online, report them online, or physically report them, either online, telephonic, or in person. Will we charge them a fee? Absolutely not. That's part of doing business as a police officer. Any crime that's been committed in our city or outside of our city, we have a legal obligation to take a report, and that's just part of the service as a police officer. We do not charge anybody for a police report to investigate. We do not.
So maybe I'm confused then. When we're looking at this and it says suggested fee, my interpretation is we pass this, we approve it, and it goes to the public and they go, oh, I'm not gonna request that. I'm just gonna take the hit and have to buy a new phone because it's gonna cost me $423 according to the website, for the city website. Same thing for if respond due to false alarm, I understand the cost, that's not what I'm questioning. But if it says the first false alarm, we're gonna charge you the 187, I'm not gonna have an alarm system that hooks up. It's just gonna be sitting there because it's gonna cost me too much if I even have one false alarm.
Yeah, because, well, we want to get into council discussion, but
Yeah,
I'll
that's my
save
question.
my comment for later.
Am I wrong then? Is this what we would produce to the public?
So, if, Councilmember Lowe, so I'll have a recommendation, maybe it'll come a little bit later, we can discuss, but my recommendation would be that, because it appears that the fees or the cost to conduct the service is what's in the fee schedule, but what we're required to charge is different than that. So my recommendation would be that we continue this to a date certain, next council meeting, and give staff an opportunity to work with our consultant to make sure that in instances like this, where council should be aware of the actual cost to conduct the service,
Yeah.
but the right fee should be reflected in the report.
Correct, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Any other specific questions, especially in light of the recommendation?
Well, go ahead.
We haven't done this in 14 years. It's recommended doing it in every 5 years. City Manager, do you agree with that assessment? That we should be doing this every 5 years?
I think at a minimum, we should be looking at it internally every 5 years. Our finance director will make a determination on whether we need to do a complete audit, bringing in a consultant at the 5th year. But we look at it on a yearly basis and evaluate the whole process, probably at least on a 5-year basis.
So how do we codify that? How do we make that as part of, like, if we didn't do it in 12 years or 14 years, and we're seeing lots of discussion on this and we're going to continue it, can we make it as part of the resolution that it is looked at every 5 years, at 5-year increments?
I think we can do that, and also we can include it as part of our strategic goals and objectives to bring this back every 5 years, and then we can also include it in the resolution.
Okay.
Can I ask you another question? This is more like a process, and it might be for our staff. If something changes annually, like with increases and not just MOUs like personnel, but if it's like a fee we charge, like for, I don't know, for the 4th of July parade, and that changes, do we change then the fee schedule every year to reflect that? Or do we put like not more than?
Just to clarify, like, what change do you mean? Like
So
the
like,
cost
let's say
of?
we increase the cost.
Like, but we can't just increase the cost. So you're saying the cost of giving the service increases for some reason?
Okay.
Like if we have to provide something and that cost of that something goes up?
Goes
Is
up.
that what you mean?
Yeah, so for instance, exactly this, we have a case where the fun run is supposed to be $31 and $25, and then it's gonna increase due to costs, and they're charging more, and so it'll be $35 and $30. Can we not do that, or do you have to do it annually? What's the process?
So the process is that every year the council, we bring back our fee schedule to the council. Council has an opportunity to review it. If there's any increases or decreases, then that's our opportunity to discuss that. But it would come back to council on an annual basis to approve the fees for that year.
Because it wasn't, do that, okay.
Could I ask a follow-up to that, City Manager? Would it be fair to say then that maybe, and part of the problem here is that these costs have gone up, we all know that, and we haven't been keeping up with it in terms of our fees. And so this is shock to us and be shock to our constituents. So in that process where we do look at the fees every year, could we not kind of do a fee study each year or something short of a fee study so that we can have a realistic appraisal of how things have gone up in that year and then raise them that year so that we have an incremental issue as opposed to this big heart attack issue every 5 or 14 years? Seems to, and I would also ask, if we need to recover costs in some of these areas, is it possible for us tonight to approach this by taking some of these fees and maybe dividing them up by percentages and installing them in increments over the next 2, 3, and 4 years? Or is that something we can even do legislatively? instead of trying to get $1,200 starting tonight, maybe 300, then 300, then 300, then 300.
So two questions. I think the first one, and maybe our consultant can help out, but one of the things that he recommended was that we have an escalator every year. This was almost a year-long effort, and it required all staff.
Right.
So to go through this exercise on a yearly basis would be difficult. I think the recommendation to have an annual escalator to come back where staff reviews their fees to see if that applies for their specific fees is a good way to look at it. The second part of your question, I think that if we continue this item to a date certain, the next council meeting, that gives us a week and a half to review some of these fees that seem like they're out of line, and we can make those adjustments. If we still feel that some of those fees are set too high, then we can discuss bringing them in gradually over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I just want to, it's not commenting or discussion, but I didn't take the position any of these are out of line. I think if you guys have done I think you've done an accurate job of assessing costs here. It just seems to me like the real question is, to what degree do we want to continue subsidizing anything in the list that we've got in front of us? That's, to me, the question we're going to have to deal with tonight.
Without discussion, I guess I'll put this in a question. Some of these costs did go down, as you reflected in the summary. Would you say that's due to, obviously being since 2010, would that be due to changes in, technology and how we don't need personnel to do some things, but some things are done technologically, and giving notices different, things like that? Is that kind of the general reason some things went down?
So within the report, there's actually a list of probably 15 things or reasons why they might have changed over time.
Yeah.
It could be personnel changes, who's doing the work, what's involved, what the process is required. Technology is a big one, like for business licensing. That is a big one that came into play for that for a while. A lot of cities are seeing a decrease in those when they're fee-based. So it does, and then the other part is you might have fees now that have split out certain applications in certain areas, so now it's only recovering a different part of it as opposed to a greater part of it. So it could be a lot of different things that factor into that.
And I don't know if this is a question for planning and zoning, but for instance, a newspaper noticing fee was $650. Is that in addition to the newspaper actually paying the newspaper to do the advertisement, or is that inclusive of that? It was at $650 when it's a new fee.
Yeah, I know it includes the cost for the noticing with the newspaper, but I wasn't sure if it also included the staff time involved with that as well.
Mayor and council member, so the newspaper noticing fee includes staff time and also the newspaper, the actual payment to the local newspaper.
That's great, thank you. And then could you maybe, I know this is another high question, but just it might be very valid. Why is the cost of, say, a block party so much higher? Or say, and I know it's kind of similar to that, but it could be very valid that things like used to just happen. You could put up a block in your street, and now there's probably legalities you have to do.
That's exactly right. The tasks involved and the procedures that are required, they've only increased over the years. Every 2 years you have a new code, right? So there's just additional requirements that are needed so the actual staff time that's involved can often be greater than kind of the fees that you would think they would be, right?
I guess that's true, because I guess I see street closures are at 302 now, as well as they weren't there before. And then just one other question in one other section was, and I think this is going to be for fire. Is he here? No. Oh, hi. So I really appreciate the new fees, because they really reflect the changes that are happening in fire code. So I think that's amazing that you guys have captured everything that we would probably need in Sierra Madre, and that we don't need to spend money on those when a business should. But for the paramedic subscription, it seems very reasonable. How many of our public subscribe in the paramedic subscription? What percentage?
First of all, good evening.
Sorry.
The answer to that one, at the latest check, which is not very current, I'd have to run some numbers, but my analyst is out at training this week. We saw that at 5% of the community.
Wow.
Very low.
Okay. And but in your reports, we do not charge for a first alarm, first first false alarm, and then we charge $100 for the second and a third for the response. Is that correct?
That is
So that didn't change, but where like police did change.
That is correct for us.
And do you see, the new weed abatement, or not weed abatement, I should say brush abatement, come into play in this new fee schedule since we have new codes coming down from CAL FIRE? Did that come into play at all?
For our annual brush inspections, there is no charge for that. We do that as part of basically a service for mitigation for the community, as part of our responsibility. One fee that we are introducing that's coming up is AB 38, which is when residents in the very high fire hazard severity zone are going to sell their home. They must require an inspection, or if they've had one within 6 months, we can utilize that as well. So that is an incurred cost for us that we will charge for that. There was nothing previously in the fee schedule that addressed that.
And CAL FIRE had mentioned, and LA County Fire, when we had our special meeting, had mentioned something about fees they charge for, this might be with planning as well, but inhabiting a building that's in a high fire zone, like after new construction or after new build. Do we have a fee for that? Or do we have that in our code?
Again, that might be deferred to planning. It won't be on the fire side at all.
Okay. And then last, who does the fire inspections for commercial, fire inspections for multi-resident, and fire inspection for schools? Is that our contract fire marshal, or is that our staff?
Basically, that is your firefighters, suppression staff. We're mandated to do, for example, multifamily residents, schools and churches, both private and public. Those are mandated inspections. The initial inspections are done by the fire crews themselves, so it could be an engine of 3 or the ambulance of 2. So basically, all 5 on-duty personnel are going to go out. We'll split the responsibilities on the inspections, and then they reconvene. Anything that, in addition, could be basically that same crew going out. If there are notices of correction and they have to go out and do re-inspections, it could be the same crew again. So that is a very high cost for the public, but currently that is our only model to do it. Contracted fire marshal is only contracted for 1 day a week, and it's not for that service. Should we bring in additional personnel to, for lack of better terms, in a fire prevention role, we could potentially see a decrease in that by sending that person out maybe on the 2nd and 3rd type of inspection. Commercial inspections, schools, churches, and multi-residentials, it is my preference that our engine companies and basically our on-duty personnel do those inspections, because it does provide them with a look at the buildings they're going to be going into and what they're going to be dealing with. So we can assess the occupancy as well, what's in it, what kind of business is there, where the alarm panels are, where the fire department connections are, where the height. So it's a win-win for everybody on that. So definitely on the first inspections, we're going to keep that with on-duty personnel.
If there's, say, an arson investigation then or anything like that, there's no fee for that for our citizens?
No, there's not. The only fee that would be associated with that would be for a report, a public request for the report. But we have a obligated duty to do the inspection, so it will happen.
Thank you. I think I'm done. Thanks.
And one more.
Sure.
So do we have an idea, this is for Wildan, do we have an idea of what this impact has to our budget? I mean, you know, there's a lot of complexity in this. I don't know how many different fees there are, but some of this is cost recovery, and so, you know, if a lot of these are going down or going up, does this fill holes, create holes? Do we know?
So the idea behind it is if you're getting full cost recovery, it should fill a lot of those holes, right, within your department budgets for revenue cost recovery. But the issue is that your revenue codes don't directly correspond to individual fee line items. So you'll have fees going up and down, like take utilities, for instance, right? So you'll have fees in there that are going up and down, but the actual revenue effect is actually dependent on the actual occurrence level data in there. The ones that we could speak more confidently about would be like building permit fees, because it's a huge permit program, right? And so for that, based off the analysis, we're looking to recover a gap of around $650,000 to $700,000 in there. Would be kind of the ideal on that. Now, that is the biggest fee program of the city, though, for what we're looking at. So that I would point to that one as being a good one to look at. But for the other ones, it's going to be kind of a mixed bag and not necessarily known. It'll just depend on what activity levels we'll see.
And right now, and this may be for our finance staff, right now, how are we doing on cost recovery with respect to building and planning and permits? I don't know if that's to...
I think we're not. I mean, I think the point is that with the fees that we're charging for people is not recovering our fees.
So we have a $600,000 shortfall for building permits?
I'll say yes for full cost recovery, including indirect overhead, so not directly their budget item.
Good evening. Thank you for the question. So yes, there might be some indirect costs that are not being recovered, but we are receiving like 70% of the fees that we pay to Wilden for contracted out. But there is just, the fees go up and our rates haven't changed. So it's gonna help fill that gap.
So that $600,000 gap is about right from what you know.
Yeah, I could.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I guess I have a quick follow-up kind of question. In looking at the history since 2010 or even prior to that, did we ever, I'm seeing all these new fees, but these aren't all new ordinances or new businesses for, say, the brand new like fire inspections. It says new fire code permits and inspection rates. Did we just not ever charge for those? We just did them for free?
For the new fees in the fire section?
Yeah.
So yes, there might have been situations that project needed the additional inspection, and we pay for it at the hourly rate, and we're recovering. But some of those are added in case we come across that type of inspection in the future.
I just have one general question that's completely unrelated to the discussion we've been having, but I know in the past we've talked about in our housing plan, our arena talks about making sure that we are encouraging certain behavior, with respect to the arena, for example, that, we are charging fees such that we don't dissuade folks from developing housing, per our plan. So I just want to make sure that those kinds of policy decisions that we've made, previously or that we're required to make by law, that was part of the analysis here. The other thing that comes to mind is that we've asked people to, improve certain, I'm thinking of the downtown district, we asked folks to, if they had certain types of masonry, we asked them to improve. And so in cases where we've wanting to encourage compliance, was that part of the analysis in setting fees, so that we're not running sideways from the policy decisions that we've made to encourage certain behavior like development under our arena or masonry upgrades or whatever it might be? That might, yeah, probably planning. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So when we are filling out the suggested fee, we took that in mind. You can see that a lot of ministerial review that we did not increase the fee, and then we take account that a lot of projects are streamlined, like the ADU, so those all were cut back.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, I think we're done with questions.
Just procedure, that procedural issue.
Let's do public comment first, and then.
It's a question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So since I've been on the council, every year we approve our fee schedule. This is a fee study, but within this fee study is also one of the staff recommendations is to approve the new fee schedule. I just want to ask, is this Is this in lieu of us doing our annual fee schedule? This is a fee study coupled with the new fee schedule, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Did Chief have something to say?
Sure.
Just really quick for clarification, I know we're talking about the fee study that gives a full burden of what it would cost, not what actual fees. What I do want to convey to our citizens is that we're not in the business of recovery, we're in the business of public safety. And if you are a victim of a crime, please call us and report the crime.
Right.
And the bottom line is it's 10 cents a page to get a copy of the report.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay,
I just
thank
want to
you.
make clarification that please report.
Yes, thank you. Yes, please.
I want to clarify about the fee schedule. So you'll see it today in the fee study staff report because that's the user fees. And you can also see it in the budget section, but that's going to be for utility rates because that wasn't part of this fee study.
Thank you. Okay, now calling for public comment.
Madam Mayor, there are no speaker cards, nor did we receive emails.
Okay, so for discussion, I think I'd like to, given the suggestion by the city manager, spend the first part of our discussion discussing process, because I think that where we end on that will then, I think, direct the second part of the discussion, which would be more on the substance. So I guess I'd like folks to weigh in on whether they think that the approach that the city manager suggested of continuing this public hearing and having the next iteration of this be more specific as to the actual recommended fee that would be on our fee schedule, if that's something that people are in favor of.
Definitely.
Yes.
But why? Explain this to me. Our job is to make these judgments, not staff. They've told us what this is going to cost. Question is, do we want to charge it? It's our call, not theirs. I'm fine. I'm patient. I'll wait. But we're just delaying the inevitable. Ultimately, we're going to have to make the decision. I don't know if we have enough detailed information to go over every single fee tonight. That's why I think maybe thinking about coming back at a date later, maybe we could use that as an opportunity to prepare for such a discussion and get each department to come in and tell us exactly, what impact is this going to have, this proposed fee going to have on the people who are going to be impacted by the fee, because we don't want to create disincentives, and I think the chief put it well. We certainly don't want to send the message that you shouldn't call the police or you shouldn't want to build something on your property. And that's what's going to come across if we hit people between the eyes with some of these fees. Nonetheless, we have budget issues, and everybody knows it. And so recovering as much of this as we possibly can, I think, is our responsibility if we can do it somehow in some way. That's why I suggest maybe even divvying it up and doing it over several years to get to a point where we're at real cost recovery in most areas. But there may be some areas and we'll all differ on this, on where our priorities are. I personally don't want to see us raise fees for our building department. I think we should be encouraging building in this city and improvement of our properties. Ultimately, that makes our neighborhoods look better, and it makes the property values go up, and it makes the ultimate assessment go up, and it gives the city more tax revenue over time. So I think all these things have to be taken into consideration, maybe one fee area at a time. I'm not sure. If it's your pleasure the council's pleasure to wait and turn this over to staff, I'll certainly
I don't think it's just a turn it over to
support
staff,
that, but
right?
I think process-wise, it's not that we're asking staff to make the policy decisions. I think personally, we don't have in front of us a fee schedule that reflects even what I think staff thinks that they were recommending. Because the way I read the staff report and the fee schedule, to the discussion earlier, we are looking to charge, whatever the number is, $400 and something for a lost cell phone report. And so I don't feel comfortable personally acting on this actual schedule, because I don't think it actually reflects what the fee schedule is meant to reflect. And so it might just be a matter, city manager should weigh in, it might just be a matter of presenting it in a different way so that we can have a column for what the fully burdened cost is versus what
Suggested fee.
what the fee schedule, suggested fee is, and then that's what we would debate.
Exactly.
And should we have, to Councilmember Scoss, you have a very detailed process that I'm hearing in this. I'm just wondering, do we want to look at where there are big changes in fees? Because a lot of this, going down into, a $2 change or a $5 change, that's not going to impact anyone, the city or our residents significantly. But, these ones that we've all pointed out, those would be the ones that, and I don't know if we need to have a threshold or give guidance on, here's the ones that we want to kind of see and hear.
Well, and I also think to that point that we were talking about earlier is also fees that we actually expect to charge. I mean, there's a difference between like the building fees, which are, routine and almost every day someone's coming in to do something with the planning department. But, the fire fees were an example of like, we've maybe never actually had an occasion to charge this fee, but because it's in the code, it might come up and we should have a number for it. I don't want to spend a lot of time debating fees that we don't even really see or we've seen twice in 14 years. So
Yeah, I agree. And here's one thing I agree with on what you're saying. I think with the fee recovery, I do think since 2010, if we haven't charged anything more from 2010, it's time. I mean, in other words, our citizens are paying tax dollars for that person to come and do part of their building because they're paying our salaries versus they're not we should be recovering it from the person building. Our citizens shouldn't be paying for that. That goes with the same new fire codes and inspections. Why should we be paying for tax dollars for someone who I want to do a remodel on my house? It should be up to me.
Well, you have to be careful when you go down that path because so much of this is subsidized. And we're talking about things where there's, if you talk to somebody who wants to go down and just do a 400-foot addition on their house, and right now you talk to anybody and they'll tell you they think our fees are way out of line. Or we're way too expensive compared to other cities. Whether that's true or not, that's what they'll tell you. So we deal in a world of perceptions. And so you want to go up 20%, 40%, 100%. And in a short period of time, that's going to have an impact on whether or not you're going to have people come down and ask for building permits.
And I do like the column that shows the differences, and that is very rare, except for the ones we just pointed out, that obviously, like we said, I don't think that department or that fee would actually be charged. It's stating the cost recovery. It's not stating really what that department would want to charge for that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's why we need to bring it back, is because there should be a different column. What is the real suggested fee versus what's the cost recovery fee? Here, this is just all cost recovery.
And some of it might be the same. I mean, some of it might be that the recommendation is we do charge full cost recovery, and that's, to your point, that the policy decision that we need to make on certain fees. Because there are some things, I think, that really are specifically beneficial to a particular citizen, and to your point, that shouldn't necessarily be borne by the entirety of the population.
Yeah.
Well, if there's incongruency between what the staff is thinking about what we should be charging based on their experience, based on their knowledge of the lay of the land in their area, and what the suggestion is here through consulting, I totally agree. We should know that, and I don't see it here. So I support your idea in terms of getting that information. Yeah.
And then I think city manager might have something.
I just want to clarify, in the report it shows, and we'll use PD as the example, the cost to perform the task, what it would take to fully recover. But if somebody has a public records request, we're obligated to provide that at a certain cost. And I want to make sure that the report reflects that accurately. To Chief's point, we don't want to discourage people from coming to our police or fire department for certain services. So I think that's the main reason why I'd like to continue it to date certain, to make sure that we clean that portion up.
But I think you're also hearing, and this is where I was going to go after we decided process, and we've kind of straddled, but I think it might also be helpful to prepare for that continued date, to hear some of the direction, because I think the other part of that now should be, and people should weigh in on what they'd like to hear, but from what I'm hearing, there probably needs to be some justification if the recommendation is for full cost recovery and it's a significant increase, in the areas that we've been discussing, or otherwise, that we would want some discussion from staff, some backup, some justification for the recommendation of full cost recovery in, the building and planning fees, for example, for that Councilmember Goss brought up. So I think also we can provide that direction, and maybe it's, any fee that's increasing by more than 50% or whatever the right number is, that would be helpful just to understand what the rationale is. And I mean, I think we understand conceptually that if we are not charging full cost recovery, that creates a hole in the budget. But I also understand that there isn't a direct correlation between the fee is this, which is only 50% of cost recovery, so we have a 50% less number here. There's no sort of direct tie to that, given the fully burdened calculation, because it takes into all the indirect costs and stuff. So when, for example, when we say that there's a $600,000 hole in the budget, we're not going to see a line item like, revenue loss of, non-cost recovery fees. And so it's more conceptual. And I think we need to understand that as well, because we have lots of holes in our budgets coming up. And if we can fill some of them by this fee, then that's could be a difference maker in some areas.
So I like your idea of fees that increase by more. I think 50% makes a lot of sense. I would add to it, the fee of more than $200.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, 50% not going from like 1 to 2.
Right, exactly. Right. I also think, and two other thoughts. One, I'd like to make sure that the suggested fee in there is the actual fee that is being suggested. Not, what we're hearing is the suggested fee is not the fee we're suggesting. So I want to make sure we're really confused on that. I think multiple of us are. I've seen some heads nodding. And the other, I think, to build off of Councilmember Goss's point is that, to the extent we can, and I don't know if Wildan has got this, is if we've got a large change in a fee, how that compares to other cities. So we can respond to that feedback of saying, look, we've been subsidizing this for a long time. We're just coming in line to what San Marino or South Pass or whomever is doing it. I think that would be really helpful, because otherwise, if we're just doing it on the full cost, and a lot of other cities are justifying it another level or another approach, they're subsidizing it, that's important for us to know in the decision-making process.
That's a good point, thank you. Mm-hmm. Any other guidance that we'd like to give to improve, or to inform, I should say, the future discussion or presentation?
Yeah, a couple things. So, as I mentioned, I recall approving each and every fee schedule, and to me, this does not look like the fee schedule that we normally approve. So I would want the actual fee schedule that's going to be published for our constituents and residents to be what's brought before us. And generally that includes impact fees, which we didn't include here, such as, sewer and park and all those things. So the actual fee schedule, I think it should be part of the agenda packet that we actually approve.
Although I do think some of those are coming up later tonight in connection with the budget. So you're just saying that at least with respect to these fees.
Well, when we approve a fee schedule per se, it's the actual schedule that's generally published for the public.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's one thing. The other is, I might disagree a little bit. I think maybe we give staff policy and just have them have a public or a common sense approach on some of these issues. So kind of talking about the police fees, right? When we're thinking about those, most of those are sunk costs, because Chief told us we always write a report. So for us to come after the fact and say, well, now you're going to pay us for it because you want it. No, I think what should be captured is the printing, what we can. And if we're able to then capture some other, is like whoever does the physical act of going out, pulling that report out of the archives, not the police actually taking the report, but if we're going to go above the 10 cents, it would be something common sense, like how much did it cost to actually generate those 10 cents per pages, which is a staff member researching, pulling, printing, and providing. To me, that's common sense type of analysis. And I I agree with you, Councilmember Goss. I struggle with that. When I look at the warrants every month, and I'm not casting aspersions on Wildan, but I see our every council meeting, I see our warrants, and I see how much we pay to Wildan every month for plan check and those things, right? And it's like, but the other side of the coin is, well, if we're not paying them, we'd be paying an employee, and with fully burdened rates, we see what those rates can be. So, to your point, yes, we want to encourage people to do things correctly that are checked when they're remodeling their homes and improving their homes, and we don't want to discourage improving of homes. So, when someone's thinking, I want to redo all my windows, not only do I have to like hire the contractor, buy the windows, do all that, but then I'm gonna have to pay like a percentage of that to permit fees, which may dissuade me from actually going forward and doing that maintenance. So that's kind of for me, there's a struggle there. What is the benefit to the overall community versus as we see our Wildan warrant checks going higher and higher and higher and higher every month? How do we reconcile and balance those two things? I'm with you on that, and you're correct. It's better for the community overall if our housing stock is maintained.
And improving in value.
Yes, yes.
Because that's how we get our revenue.
That's true.
It's our top source of revenue is property tax.
So if we're foregoing $600,000 and what we could be recovering for, as we see the housing stock turning over, a potential of $1 million a year, I mean, maybe that's.
I guess I'm also
we're
seeing the
just
difference
making
between
that
like
up.
our huge developments that are coming into town. These fee schedules with the new development versus, and also One Carter and all the other developments, not like like me doing a remodel, you adding on an ADU, but the development coming into town, if we can recover those costs for the development to come in, they're still coming in and improving. So I think you have a fine line there. I think you're right. It needs to be a balance where it's what's helpful to our community. Also the same thing like for a block party. Like, do we still want to encourage people to have community block parties? I think it's very healthy. I think it's great. But if it's going to cost that much more, then, and it's such an exorbitant amount, they're not going to have block parties anymore. Same thing with, home parties. You're right. We have to keep on our lines. We have to have, we have noise ordinances for reasons. But if the first time you violate that, it's a $1,400 fine, then we're going to discourage people. So I can see that. And I also mentioned this earlier with fees. Do you remember a while back when LA County, or I think it was LA City, was looking at parking tickets? And the fees went from, say, $45 for your parking violation, and then each time you waited and you didn't pay it on time, it went to like $300 to $600, and that became such an exorbitant amount that no one was able to pay that fee. So when we're looking at fees like for shutting off water or restarting your water, if it's too high, I've got to guess that person's already struggling. If we make it unreachable for them to even pay that back or to restart their water, that's the same thing, like encouraging community and understanding. And I think, our staff does a great job at really being personal. They reach out to those people and find out personally what's going on without just, here's your notice, shut down your water. But at the same time, it's like we can't have it so expensive that they can't even pay that to get their water back on.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, Councilmember Garcia, about common sense. I think the staff did what we told them to do. They went out and they figured out what it cost to deliver these services.
Yeah.
And I believe they did a good job of that. So the question really is doing that balancing act. And I've heard several examples here that I didn't tender where we probably want to continue subsidizing.
First alarm, for instance.
Yeah,
right?
but how far do we subsidize? I mean, do we take a couple steps towards cost recovery? How far do we go? What percentage do we go this year? Maybe come back and have an agreement. We look at it again next year with the idea of.
I would say that our policy shouldn't be to reduce cost recovery. It should be to at least marginally increase cost recovery, because we've had fees for a certain amount of time, and we're not in the business of rolling back the fees.
I agree with that.
Although we are in many instances.
Well, some of those are like, it was actually a tax and it wasn't, yeah.
Well, that one, yes, but I mean, if you look at the summary, I mean, almost every department had some amount of fees going down. So I mean, it's not, and that wasn't the explanation for all in decrease.
Yeah, and I like to also step back big picture. Fees, licenses, and permits are what, 17% of our revenue, which is considerable. But if we're changing 17% of the revenue by maybe 0.5%, is it really going to worth all the heartburn and all the Tums and Rolaids that our staff would have to go through to fix it? I don't know.
I'm sorry, to fix it? What do you mean?
To every year come up with.
Oh, yeah,
Not
no,
every
no.
year. I
Yeah.
mean, like this year.
Yeah. And I think, and another thing what we discussed, I think another issue would be good to not necessarily have every 5 years the full-on fee study. If we are looking at MOUs and if we're increasing costs by the cost of labor and or the consumer price index, maybe we should have like an advisory every 5 years. Let's have staff look at it and see if it's worth going and having a full 1 year study from a consultant to go forward and spend the money to do this. Because maybe that's a way that we can save money. It's not doing this
Yeah,
every
I would
5
prefer
years.
not to mandate the full fee study every time because we may not need it. But I think to me, the way I interpreted your suggestion or question was we need something built in so that we get a more regular reminder so that we don't go another 14 years before.
Yes, that was my intent in it, and so I'm open to how we execute it. I like Councilmember Garcia's suggestion where we're doing it in smaller bites or we're looking at it in different ways. So, yeah, it doesn't need to be black and white. It must be a fee study. It is, we need to look at the fees so we stay up to date. So however we do that, I'm open to the most cost-effective way to be effective.
Do we maybe recommend continuing to have the two of us that sat in on the fee study session to meet with staff to see kind of where we are and see if that's within the policy that we're discussing here today prior to it coming to council?
I mean, it seems to me like if you guys are willing to do that and put some time in, it would only benefit the work product that we would consider in the next go around of this. And so if you're willing to do that, I think that would be a good interim step to then maybe hone kind of what we see and what the materials that we have in front of us for the continued discussion. Is that something you're willing?
I'm willing to do
Okay.
I'm willing to do that, yeah.
Yes.
Does that make sense, City Manager? Or, okay.
Thank you.
All right, so I think unless folks have other directive type comments, I think what we need then is a recommendation to continue the public hearing, or not a recommendation, I'm sorry, a motion.
But are we going date certain, or are we going,
I would,
If we do a date certain, we won't have to notify the public hearing. I'm comfortable with July 23rd, and that gives us time to work with our consultant, have one meeting with the subcommittee, then bring it back to the council. If our finance director and Roland is okay with July 23rd? That timeline is okay for completing the necessary changes?
I guess I want clarification on exactly what changes you want to make, right, prior to. Some of it is going to be staff directed, but so that's why.
On the staff side, we're comfortable with the changes. If Will then is available or can have coverage for July 23rd, I think we're comfortable. Alternatively, we could set it for a date uncertain and report back to council and just renotice the meeting.
I tend to think Wildan's role is minor in this task.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
He did
agree.
a lot of work up to
Thank you.
where we are, and I think we have a pretty good understanding of what was done. So I think it's going to be more staff-driven than consultant-driven.
I agree with that. Okay, so then, if folks are amenable, I would look for a motion to continue to a date certain of July 23rd.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Public hearing continued. All right, so our last public hearing,
Thank you.
the budget.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. So today we'll be discussing the proposed budget for fiscal year 24-25. And the budget process started in January. We did have multiple discussions with the executive team and different departments in order to get us to this point to present to you a balanced budget. For the overview of the presentation, we'll start with the general fund, and then we'll discuss capital projects, utility funds, and end with some questions. For general fund, on the revenue side, we do see a steady growth in revenues, and the major revenues are property taxes and utility users tax, which make up about 70% of the proposed, the projected revenues. The projected revenues for next fiscal year are 17.2 million.
Madam Mayor, do you mind if we jump in and ask questions, or do you want her to? Or
It's up to our finance director. Would you prefer questions as we go or to hold?
Yeah, we can do questions too.
Okay, please.
So if I'm looking at other revenue, and as I was looking through the budget, this kind of goes in concert with the treasurer's report. Our LAIF funds have been paying a lot more than they had been previously, and then our laddered U.S. Treasury short-term maturities that we're holding to maturity have been paying a lot as well. And we can see that it was evidence that we had first question is other revenues where we would find interest income?
Yes, it is.
And would you say a majority of the other revenues would be interest income?
It is, correct.
Okay. So we saw the adopted fiscal year 23-24, 224,000 in other revenue, but we amended it to 907,000. I'm assuming that's due to unexpected increases in interest rates and LAIF returns. Is that? And I'm looking at page 4 of the staff report.
It was, part of it was for interest revenues, but then we also had a portion of the election reimbursement, one-time settlement, one-time contribution from Athens agreement for 200,000. So it's a mix of
So it's
items
commingled some of that, okay.
for the mid-year, yes.
But as far as the 586,000, that's projected for next year. I just quickly did a back of the envelope. I looked at our treasurer's report. I saw that within our reserves, we're about 28% of general fund in our reserves, and I looked at the return we were going to get, did a multiplication, and it was roughly 560,000. Is that the process you did in order to come up with this other revenue number?
That is the process, usually more towards mid-year, to see that interest rates are remaining at that level. But for the proposed, we use a little bit more conservative side, so we do have around 350,000 in the general fund projections.
Okay.
Because if revenues don't, the interest doesn't come in, then we budget on the expenditure side.
I appreciate that conservative outlook, but thank you. I just wanted to see if that was what I was looking at. Okay, thank you.
And for the expenditure side, we are projecting expenditures of 17.3 million, and that includes contingency and also transfers out to other funds. Overall, the general fund is projected to have a deficit of about 141,000. And it's due to the additional discretionary payment budgeted for next fiscal year. And that's in order to monitor long-term liabilities and increase our funded ratio from 84% to the minimum of 85%.
Councilmember Garcia.
One clarifying on slide 5. So that is a change in our fund balance. You are still providing us with a balanced budget. This 141,000 is just the change in the fund balance, not, but since we are having some transfers in, we are in fact presenting a balanced budget. Is that correct?
A balanced budget on the operating side. So for 141,000 in the deficit, that can be done. We're proposing to use reserves to fund the additional prepayment.
That's what I was getting at. Thank you. I want to make sure that was clear to everybody. Okay, thank you.
I also just have a question about the prepayment. This is, again, as you said, to get us to our 85% funded number, but this is not at all taking into account what the performance of the fund is. So that this number may be higher, probably not that much lower, but higher based on the fund's performance to the extent that they require us to top up a shortfall in investment returns.
Yes, correct. So this is from the latest Excel that I had from CalPERS tool, where we can project out and then input what we project to do as an additional prepayment, and then it gives us a funded status projection. It will be reviewed when we get the new evaluation, and we'll see how investment returns did.
Because we're still waiting on investment valuations for fiscal 2023, correct?
Correct.
May I follow up on that?
Yes, please.
Great question, Mayor. And the last two League of Cities, Marcy Frost wasn't there. And generally when she's there, there's a discussion about the discount rate and whether or not there's a committee of local or leaders in the state that decide on whether or not to change the discount rate. And I don't know if you've heard, I haven't been doing any research or looked at it lately. Has there been discussions of changing the discount rate once again for the fund, or is your understanding there, I don't know if it's where it is now, was somewhere below 7% from what I recall. Are they looking to keep it the same?
I have not heard about the discount rate, but that's something that as I continue to discuss with our actuary, I can ask more questions on what they foresee. I did ask what he on the investment returns, and he did say that they project to come at what was expected. But in July is when they actually send out the notice of the final projections for interest.
But it's my understanding that
investment returns.
the unfunded actuarial liability calculation is based on what the discount rate might be, right?
Yes, it is one factor.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So some other items in this budget, we did decrease part-time hours without reducing service levels. It was mainly from the internship program that we reduced some hours. We also added one full-time position in the fire department. And it is an upcoming election year, so election costs were also included in part of the budget. For capital projects, we have 14.45 million budgeted for investment in capital purchases and projects. And in this budget, we reallocated American Rescue Plan Act funding to different projects. And the reason why is because due to Treasury's deadlines on the obligation deadline, we reallocated to projects that can be reasonably obligated by December 31st, 2024. That means we enter into a contract, we have a purchase order, and that reallocation was done in this budget. That way we don't risk losing the funds. And this also allowed the city to invest in capital needs and purchases without using general fund reserves.
And that's in a separate revenue account, right? That's not, we can't have 14 million in the general fund. That's in a capital improvement fund is a separate budget item, right?
So
The pie chart.
that leads to my next slide.
You're welcome.
Out of the 14.4 million, here we show, I know it's a little small, but we show the capital funding. How is it funded? How is the 14.4 funded? So we do have utility funds, one-time American Rescue Plan Act, city-funded district assessments, development impact fees that we have to use. And then as the majority of it is special revenue funds. And it's important to note too that part of this other special revenue funds is one-time grants for the library project, and that's about 9 million.
Big chunk of it.
I mean, this pie chart looks very different this year than it has in past years. I mean, for the exact reason that you just mentioned, right? Because we have $10 million or so in this funding source, so that we do not have to fund it out of the general fund.
Yes, correct. Here is a list of some of the capital projects. It's not all inclusive, just to give an overview of the projects that are projected for next fiscal year. As mentioned, the largest, one of the largest ones is the Library Meaningful Improvement Project. We also continue to invest in annual street projects and equipment for public safety, as well as a citywide compensation study that is budgeted next fiscal year. That's just some of the projects.
A quick question. How is a cybersecurity initiative a capital project?
So cyber security initiatives would be, it's a capital purchase, so like a one-time purchase, not a recurring expenditure.
Like hardware or something like that?
Yes.
Okay. Seems like a somewhat low number to me, given the importance of cybersecurity, but.
And as far as fleet, that's coming from different buckets as well, right? That's not just general fund. We have probably some utility and some general fund as well.
Yes, for citywide fleet, it will be the internal service fund that fleet, and it has reserves that is being funded, funding it for next fiscal year, and it's citywide vehicles.
And there's a priority for electric as the first choice. If that doesn't work, we go with internal combustion engines.
I would direct, I would get more clarification from our city manager or public works director.
So we're always looking, we need to comply with electrification, so we are looking at that as an option. Some of our utility trucks will consider electrification for some of those. For some of the police vehicles, right now, we're looking at options, but yeah, that's something that we'll consider.
So is it right to say, do we have a policy for electrification primarily, and then if it doesn't make sense?
I think cost is a major driver. We need to make sure that we are able to provide the vehicles that we need for our fleet and police, and if the cost of electric vehicles is prohibited for this fiscal year, then we may not be able to do it. But it is something that is going to be taken into consideration. We're moving in that direction. We've made a couple of electric vehicle purchases, and we want to continue that.
Okay. Is there any funds potentially from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that can be used for capital projects? Do we know, and has our consultant, our grants consultant, helped us identify anything that comes out of the bipartisan infrastructure law?
We continue to work with our consultant. There's nothing that stands out right now for the next fiscal year that qualifies for funding in our capital improvements.
And then finally, this doesn't include the potential federal funds from Judy Chu's office that we have requested and that is going through the process?
That is correct. And our finance director can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not believe that was included in this budget.
Yes, correct.
So the radio dispatch console would be separate from the radio refresh that we were asking for from Representative Chu's office?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, right now it says it's funded by ARPA and the more detailed funding.
Yes, it's partially funded by ARPA and then city funded.
So then, because there's other replacement radio sections that are for, say, fire department or for other police units that are, say, unfunded. So I'm guessing that would change with those funds.
Yes, there's in the future years unfunded projects listed for us to plan for the need, and as part of the grant, the funding, we would use that funding to fund for those purchases that we foresee in the future.
Great.
two questions while we're on capital improvement.
Sure.
So one is Lizzie's Trail and improvements for 80,000. I know last year we approved allocations from the budget to improve Lizzie's and/or the Richardson House. Were those spent? And is this a rollover or is this additional funds?
This is a carryover to next fiscal year.
Okay. And second one is, and I'm sorry, I have my glasses, but I
It's really
can't,
small.
I can't
Here
see
you go.
whether or not the improvements to the lights at Heasley Field and Sierra Vista Park are still prioritized in our capital improvement project.
Yes,
Thought they were.
it is included.
That is included. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So now to utility funds. The water and sewer funds are in a good fiscal condition. We recently recently performed a utility rate study that took into consideration the revenue needs for operations and future improvements. The water fund is expected to have capital improvements in water main replacement projects and also the generator purchase. And on the sewer side, a jetter truck is budgeted for operations as well as wastewater infrastructure repairs.
So question on the water main replacements. So in 2 slides ago, when we had the street, so the annual street projects are going to be combined with the water main replacements, right? We do the water main and the street, so those funds are going to be are going to go together on a project. Is that correct?
For next fiscal year, I don't know what the plan is.
So if you have a water main going in, you have to dig up the street, right? And then you have to, oftentimes we pave after it. So help me understand.
So the idea is here, we want to avoid repaving a street where we know we have to come back and do water mains. But we do have a list that prioritizes streets, and we have a list that prioritizes water mains. Sometimes they overlap and they mesh and everything works out great. Sometimes we have water mains that need to get replaced, and we need to allocate our street funding to other streets. But again, if it's a street where we know that the water mains are bad and we can't do both in that year for whatever reason, we'll likely delay the street work until we can do both.
Delay the water work, you mean?
Delay the water work. Next year, a priority is the Upper Canyon. We made that commitment to the residents there. And so I would call on our Public Works Director to maybe give some more detail on which streets are going to be repaved next year. But I do know that the water mains on Woodland in the Upper Canyon are in desperate need of repair. We've made that commitment already, and the streets need repair as well. So specifically to tell you exactly where that overlap is, I don't have that, but that's generally the way we approach it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Could I have a follow-up with that kind of coordination? Could you also, since I remember doing the Upper Canyons, the Lower Canyon up near the dams, Woodland water main, can you also tie in with coordinating with fire and making sure that the new requirements for road, I know we probably can't be exactly the size that they wanted, but there are some restrictions that CAL FIRE has for high fire zones, for how much clearance is on either side, or whether there has to be the road and then no homes, or road and no plant life. So could you make sure we would be able to coordinate water with fire and see if there's any regulations that we need to adhere to if we're already redoing the road?
So when we, being that we're built out, the size of the roads are pretty much set. And that process typically involves removing a certain layer of asphalt, repairing the subsurface, and putting new asphalt in. Typically, we don't expand streets, but to where it is feasible, we can work to coordinate with the fire department if there is an application.
There was because there was one point that CAL FIRE and LA County Fire made, was that we're already in code violations up in the canyon because of our roads, and some of them luckily get what's grandfathered in, but some of the new codes that have come down since we're in a high severity fire zone, we naturally just violate because of our building.
Yeah,
So
and
that can be
when,
analyzed.
I think when you just from driving those streets, sometimes it seems like property line is almost at street side, so I
Mhm.
don't know that there's even room for us to go any further.
Yeah.
But I will make a note that
Thank you.
we coordinate with fire department
Thank you.
when we're resurfacing streets.
And I'll just ask, since we're on it, that jetter truck, there's no chance that it can be electric? Or have we looked at it?
I know that they're starting to develop fire trucks that are electric, but we'll definitely look into having a jetter truck that's electric. I think one of the challenges that we'll have is the charging infrastructure, especially with a vehicle that large and the battery capacity that it will need. Those trucks carry a ton of weight, and my concern and something we can look into is if the batteries are depleted, how long it will take to recharge those batteries to make sure that that vehicle's ready to go the next day. But definitely something that would be, I think, exciting to have an electric jetter truck. We were one of the first, I think we had the first sewer truck that went from gas to natural gas, and that was a big deal 10, 15 years ago when we did that because that reduced emissions. To take the next step, if it's something that we can afford and something that we could do, I think it'd be something that we'd all be excited about.
Fantastic, thank you.
James might have some information on that from SCAC.
He stole my thunder. We did very well
I was
with
gonna say.
Look forward to that.
One more on capital improvements.
Sure.
And maybe, I don't want to steal, let me go forward a slide. No, so, prior to Director Semino's retirement, he provided us a wonderful 5-year master plan on sidewalk improvements. I'm looking on the line items for the capital improvement programs. I see streets, I see water, but I don't see sidewalks in there. Is it, maybe I just going too quickly through it? Is it in there? Are we taking a year off from sidewalks, or am I just missing it?
So any street project would be under the street rehab project.
So sidewalks would be under street rehab project?
Yeah, the details of what projects would be better answered by our public works director.
Please.
Good evening. Yes, our Director of Finance is correct. Currently, we will be picking up the sidewalk work this coming fall. It'll be the northwest section of the city.
And are we currently, do we have part of the budget where we see areas that we're not actually going to replace this year, where, let's say we have a tree root lifting a sidewalk, do we have room in the budget to make, I don't know what they call that, but something where a resident won't trip and fall and get injured, as far as like not a full repair, but a Band-Aid type of repair?
Yes, sir. That is priority. Safety, of course. Situations where we come across lifted sidewalks due to root, due to damages, that will be addressed immediately.
And that was something you put in your budget?
Correct, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And just in terms of the sidewalk project that Councilmember Garcia referenced that we approved, we're on track as far as that goes in terms of the way that laid out, different segments being done over certain periods of time?
Yes, Mayor, Madam Mayor, yeah, we are on schedule.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Garcia, just a reminder for the community as well. We broke the project up into several years, addressing several quadrants of the city, and depending on the degree of how much it's raised, we'll either grind it or we'll remove it and replace it. So that's going to be part of the project.
Great.
Can I just add something? I walk the city a lot, and I've seen a huge improvement across the city. And one of those really bad ones was right across from Memorial Park on South Hermosa. It was like that for years. And they came in and completely eliminated the roots, and it's a beautiful sidewalk there now. And so it's not just aesthetically, but it's also, I'm sure, reduced liability and made people safer. So I've seen the improvements firsthand.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
then I did want to mention that in the capital section in water sewer, you'll see that we're using development impact fees. That's something that we want to appropriate. That way we're using them, and you'll soon see a 5-year report for that. So I like to include a what's on the horizon slide because it goes in the discussion of the budget. So back in April, a long-term projection was prepared, and it was updated again as part of the budget process with new information. We basically take the proposed budget and apply the projections going forward. And I wanted to include them here as an overview. So we do have a balanced budget for this fiscal year. And as we look into the next 5 years, we don't have a structural balanced budget. So in order to bridge the gap, they'll need a structural change in revenues and or expenditures. But I did want to include it here for transparency reasons and also a long-term view of the general fund, since we're talking about the budget and a balanced budget this fiscal year.
Question here. So if you go back one slide, so this looks like it shows an $8,900 surplus, but we just saw a $141,000 deficit. Help me square that circle.
Yes, I forgot to mention. So in the long-term projections, we do look at recurring revenues against recurring expenditures. And the reason that we said that this fiscal year we have a balanced budget is because recurring in operating, we do. The deficit is due to a one-time additional prepayment of $150,000.
Okay, so 150,000 minus 141.
Correct.
There you go. Okay. And this is a structural deficit, so we're still seeing that helpful presentation, what I call a 3-5, a 3% increase in revenue and a 5% increase in expenses. That trend is still continuing, right? We haven't seen any changes.
Yeah, the trend is still continuing, but I just wanted to provide it as part of the budget process.
Can't include it enough. Thank you.
Can I ask you an overall question then? When we looked at this projection prior, we looking at our deficit in 2026, 2027 was when we really started seeing a deficit. In the actual work that all the departments have done, did you see this deficit occurring sooner? And therefore, we had to make up more? Did different departments have to make more cuts in order to reach a zero?
Yes, thank you for that question. So this fiscal year, in the draft budget internally, we did see a deficit this fiscal year before bringing it to council. But we took a executive meeting, departments met, and we made difficult decisions as a team to reduce the budget where each department saw they could reduce in order to bring a balanced budget this fiscal year. And I think our city manager can go into more detail.
So our finance director talks about difficult decisions, and one of those decisions that we had to make is that you saw that in the fire department we went from, there's one additional full-time body. It was a part-time position, and one of the things that we talked about was if we're going to fund this full-time position or a position in any department, we have to look at the organization and decide where we're going to make a cut, because the organization as it is now can't sustain additional personnel without some type of sacrifice. Every department works really, really hard on presenting absolute needs. Our community services department made some cuts to their ongoing revenue to be able to justify a part-time position. And we made, again, a very difficult decision because we know the impacts on community services and we know the value that that part-time position would bring to our events. We also realize the value of the full-time paramedic coordinator that brings in roughly $600,000 worth of revenue to the city, and the need to fund that position.
And correct me if I'm wrong, EMS takes up the majority of our calls, correct?
Correct. I believe it's, and Chief Bartlett can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's up to 70%, if not more, of our calls. And so we had to make a very difficult decision and not fill that position so that we can in addition to other cuts that were made by the fire department and other departments, so that we can fill that needed paramedic coordinator full-time position in the department. So that's just one example of many that we had to overcome in this budget year because of the growing needs of not just the fire department,
Yeah.
but the city as a whole.
And we're still experiencing a deficit, correct? Because how many people are suggested on a fire engine? I believe it's 4, and we only have 3 per engine, which is more of a hazard to our safety. And thank goodness we're fully staffed with police department now. But when we anticipate the future and we look at what we actually have and our staffing issues, and we know personnel costs the most, we're still looking at what we're lacking in departments, and we're still working with a not fully staffed, safety-wise, what other departments have.
Well, we understand that there's different models for how you staff a fire engine. Some departments will have 3, some recommend 4. In the next few weeks, next few months, we're going to finalize the public safety master plans for police and fire. They're going to outline the needs of each department. I think what's important to note is that we have a new department that's growing. It has needs. It's going to continue to have needs. We need to be able to understand how that growth is going to happen, because every decision that we make is going to have a consequence, and it may not be 6 months, it may be a year, it may be 2 years before we realize the full impact of that decision we made. So when these 2 public safety master plans are delivered to council, we're going to have to look to see how we're going to fund these, or how we're going to manage the growth of the departments. I think the number 1 priority is for us is to be able to maintain the departments, maintain the staff that we have. We have amazing police officers. We have amazing firefighters. The organization has amazing staff members throughout. And we need to be able to before we think about growth, how do we maintain and preserve the level of service that we provide to our residents?
Yeah, and the recruiting
Maintain and retain.
Do you have a sense, just a little bit of a bigger picture, do you have a sense, and when you talk about at some point in the budget process, you were showing a deficit for this year, and then asked, or had further discussions about paring expenses back. Do you have a sense of what that deficit was that you then filled with these, just roughly?
I can give you a couple of examples. Maybe our finance director can expand. One example here is we've talked about in our strategic goals and objectives is that recruitment and retention is a priority. We know that because of increases in salary, wages at the more entry level creates compaction. That compaction is starting to impact our mid-managers, where mid-management salaries are almost or getting close to the lower level positions. One of the things that we looked at, and it's included in our budget, is to have a comprehensive analysis of all positions, but we wanted to expand that gap. That was going to be a potential $300,000 impact on the budget when we look at mid-management. So that's one.
Just to clarify, you mean adjusting mid-management salaries to account for the fact that their staff salaries have been increased? Just when you say gap.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. So it's what we're looking at is about a 20 to 25% gap in not just in what we pay compared to what other like cities pay their mid-managers. So we're looking at the compaction, and then we're also looking at how we compensate compared to other like cities.
But when you say compaction, like you're talking about employees from a manager making more than the manager. Is that right?
I'll give you an example. We have an amazing water superintendent. His direct report is making close to what he makes. And so when you look at other water utilities, the water superintendent is typically making a lot more money and there's a clear separation and gap between those two.
And that's not included in any of these projections at all?
And again, one of the very difficult decisions that we had to make is that we were not able to do that. And that $300,000 was only a 10%. It widened the gap between the supervisor and the direct report, but it didn't really narrow the gap between what we pay and what other agencies pay. We'd still be about an additional 10 to 15% below comparable market. So that's one example. Another example, so staffing. Hillary, can you help me maybe with another example?
Yeah, so internal service funds as well, fully funding those at operating cost each year. This fiscal year, we're not going to do that in order to bridge the gap in the budget. But in the next fiscal years, it is included as part of the projections.
So when we talk about internal service funds, so IT is an internal service fund, fleet is an internal service fund, our finance is an internal service fund. And this is a way for every department, including our utilities, water and sewer, to contribute towards these services that the whole city benefits from. So typically, we add reserves to that, and then that builds up the reserves so we can buy the vehicles. This year, we're not contributing to reserves, and in fact, we're drawing down on those reserves. So that would have been another additional $140,000 impact on the budget, or that is another $140,000 impact on the budget. So those are two good examples, I think, of the decisions that we had to make and changes that we had to do to our budget.
And those are not sustainable. I mean, those are choices that you made to balance this budget that cannot be made on a recurring basis.
So as difficult as the decisions were made this year, if we don't have a new funding source for next year's budget, the decisions are going to be a lot harder next year.
And is it accurate to say that did every department have to do some cuts this year to be able to meet this balanced budget?
Every department made significant, after we went through our budget process and we determined that we had to make additional cuts, every department stepped up and made additional cuts.
Thank you.
And where are we with, just speaking up further revenue, and this might be unrelated a little bit, but where are we with the previous presentation we had about including grant writers and looking for other funding sources? I thought we hired somebody, or we had someone who was
we do have a grant consultant on board, and they do also do some advocacy work, some lobbying work on our behalf, both at the state and at the federal level. One of the items that we worked with them this year was in securing funding from on the federal side, an appropriation from Congresswoman Judy Chu, who represents our district. I'll give an example. In the past, I've submitted requests when I was overseeing utilities, and we were considered, but we never made the list. One of the benefits of having the consultant, the grant writing consultant, is that he worked directly with our staff on how to put together a more favorable application. And I feel that working with our grant consultant helped us make that list of 15 that our Congresswoman recommended for approval. That's a $1.6 million allocation that would come to the city. That would allow us to buy police vehicles, radios, and other public safety related equipment that again reduces the strain on our budget. Again, that's one-time revenue, right? It's not ongoing revenue. It's a part of the puzzle, but it doesn't solve the whole equation.
Appreciate that. I encourage that more.
Okay, so just to end, this comes almost to the end of the presentation. The recommendation today are the resolutions for budget approval, the GAN limit, the fee schedule, and also appropriating the amounts budgeted.
And can you just give us since we just had a very long, detailed discussion around fees, can you just give us the high level on the fee schedule here and how it differs from the conversation we just had?
Yes, so the fee schedule here is anything that was not included as part of the user fee study. So it's utility rates, increasing that, and public facility fees.
And those were set, what was the process by which those were set?
The utility rates are coming from the proposed utility rate study that was adopted. And it's the fees that were publicized and noticed. So we just take the next fiscal years. And for public facility fees, it's the construction index change.
Thank you. Okay, I think we asked our questions during, so does anybody else have any further questions? Okay, great. I will then open it up to public comment for the budget.
Madam Mayor, there are no speaker cards, nor did the city staff receive any emails.
Thank you. All right, so back on discussion. So just a reminder that our task is to consider adopting the budget, considering approving the GAN appropriation limits, and then the fee schedule that our finance director just explained.
I'd like to just kick off. I mean, as I think people watching and hopefully staff in this room heard, we can see how hard a process this was this year. I'm really glad that we've got a zero-based budgeting approach that helps us to try to live within our revenues. But it also makes it a really hard approach. And I know that there was a lot of hours and a lot of difficult decisions that were made by staff on it. And I want to thank everybody for the tireless hours to bring us this budget today.
And just the sacrifice. I mean, if you've already thought you've cut as much as you can and then being asked to cut again, it's.
Thank you, yes.
And still provide the same services and the amazing services our city provides us.
And that's really what I wanted to say as well. Specifically, thank you to Community Services Department, because can you imagine saving your money and figuring out, oh, we're going to be able to buy this new thing, and then your parents come in and say, well, yeah, I know, but we're going to have to use that to buy a new car. Thank you for doing that. That's tough. That's really, really tough. So I just want to express gratitude to that department, but not just that department, every department. As I reflect on the past decade of the city, going back to 2014, 2015, when the UUT was sunsetting from 10% to 8% and it was going to go to 6%, we know that we were facing $500,000 million budget deficits. What happened in that time? Well, the 10% UUT was approved, but as to your point, Mayor Pro Tem, we're seeing increases in revenue that aren't keeping up with the increases in expenditures, all of the things equal. Not expending more units, but just the actual price increases in wages and or commodities. So what has happened in those 9 years, we went from basically mainly all volunteer. We had like one paid engineer that we're talking about in 2015, I think, to a fully staffed professional. So what has happened? We've had to cut until where we can't really cut anymore. I think it's a testament to our staff and coming up with a budget that is balanced with just a little bit of borrowing from reserves. But as was stated earlier, this is not sustainable. I said this in 2015, I'm saying it again today. There needs to be another revenue source in order to keep our city the way it is. And unfortunately, some of the things that we were even discussing back then on how to maybe contract things out, those prices have skyrocketed beyond what we could do internally. So we do love that autonomy. We want to keep our budget solid and the department's thriving, retention, and what's the other part?
Recruitment?
Recruitment, yes. Retention and recruitment are obviously very important. I just want to thank staff for being so patient on the retention part of things. So,
And maintain the level of service that we've got. We want to maintain that, I mean, what we're able to provide to our citizens.
yeah, like the question is, why do we go to a full professional fire department? And we've talked about this before, right? It's because we now have not just mutual aid, but we have automatic aid, which is so much better for the safety of our residents, or children, or our seniors, everybody benefits from that. So,
But even more basic than that, that's what the citizens of this town expressed their desire for, is a internal city-run fire department, professional fire department. And so I think that goes somewhat to city manager's point about being careful about decisions, because I'm fairly certain that when those opinions were being expressed, in the time frame that they were around, what was going to happen with the fire department, nobody was projecting 12 years down the line of a $1.4 million budget deficit because of what it would take to make what the desire was into a reality. And so I think that to me is a pretty good example of making sure that we are thinking about those kinds of things. And not that I don't think it would have changed people's opinions about what they wanted, but it may have better prepared the community for what that meant in terms of the fiscal support that was going to require.
I want to piggyback on that too. I mean, I literally have grown up with so many of the middle management and the management here. I mean, since my childhood with water, or through my 20s all the way to my 50s now, we have retained these amazing people that have still worked here for 30 years. Their legacies, their parents have worked here. And the reason they stay, obviously, is not the pay. So for someone to give up that amount of a salary they can get somewhere else, and we keep those amazing people that we've trained that have received so much knowledge, and they stay here, is truly remarkable. And then they're asked to even cut their own budgets as well as their own salaries and not get the raises that other people are seeing, is really, really phenomenal. And I really want to congratulate our city staff and everybody for getting this far and getting to this. And now we have to push the future and see what we're going to have to pull up for the future to help sustain that, because we do absolutely value our quality of life. And I can't ever imagine seeing a city like Sierra Madre having to become incorporated or not be able to fund ourselves. And so we have to look at what to do to keep that sustainable and this quality of life.
Councilmember Gross?
Not a lot to add to everything. I agree with everything I've heard. I'm a student of government, and I've always, wrestled with what democracy is all about. I think it's about responsiveness, giving people what they want. Maybe we don't think it's what they should have, but if people in a democracy want something, and you want to run for office, I think you're obligated to give it to them if you can. And over the years I've been on this council, I've seen our city become more and increasingly responsive to a point where I feel like we found over the last few years kind of a sweet spot. And I think we've got a good balance between what people expect and what we're delivering. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and we've talked to you, many of you have just talked about that. So we're, I think, again, reaching another point, as Councilmember Garcia accurately said. In 2015, we could all see the handwriting on the wall. We all knew that, we are at a tipping point, and I think we're getting to that point this year, going into next year. I really hate to hear that middle-level management is not compensated the way they should be, because they're critical people in any organization. I just think of our water superintendent as a person who's just fantastic. I think the world of him. So I personally will add my voice to what I'm hearing here. Yes, we need another revenue source, and we need it soon. It's not up for me to tell the taxpayer or the citizens of this city, you should pay more money or we're going to give you less services. It's up for me to tell you that we're delivering what we can, and I think it's a good product, but we're looking at not having enough money in the next couple of years. And it's going to be up to the citizens to decide that. And And I think they're going to make the right call here. I think we'll get their help. But as far as I'm concerned, this budget is the product of blood, sweat, and tears. I admire everybody involved, especially our city manager. You can just tell by looking at him. This is tough for him. So, hey, hopefully we'll have some be a little easier in a couple of 3 years if we can get over this revenue issue. And I just wanted to say this. For anybody watching, I understand it's an expensive time to live in California. It's a very expensive time. Inflation's been going up. I think it's less this year than it's been, but prices are something like 25–30% higher across the board over the last 3 or 4 years. So as we face those in our own household budgets, just remember that our city has faced those cost increases just like we have. And we can't just pretend like they don't face the costs that we face. We have to, I think, acknowledge that. So anyway, I'm willing to support this budget, and I'm hopeful about the future.
Mayor Protem.
I was just going to take the opportunity to make a motion to adopt the annual budget consideration of Resolution 2435 and Resolution 2423 and Resolution 2434.
Was that 2433? I think you said 2423.
I should have said 2433. Thank you. Yes, so 2433, 2433, 2434, and 2435.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Or actually, I need a second.
A second.
Sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion,
Mayor,
resolution passes.
I know it's a little unorthodox, but I'd like to take a moment to thank our executive team.
Yes.
Thank our finance director. January through June is an incredibly stressful time for finance, on top of all the work that they do. Hillary and her team do amazing work for us. I'm hoping that I can see Hillary smile a lot more now that this process is over. And also, again, thank you, Councilmember Garcia, for acknowledging the sacrifice that our Community Services Department, that's led by our Deputy City Manager Aguilar. She has a little rocky figure in her office, and we inspire ourselves, and we lean on each other, and that little rocky symbolizes that it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, is how many times you get up. And so our Community Services Department, through her leadership, is going to get up and find a way to continue to provide the services. And again, thank you to our amazing team here in Sierra Madre.
I really couldn't say anything better. I was going to say something very similar, but you did it in such a wonderful way that I can only say I wholeheartedly agree. And I really think people, we've had a number of public opinion expressed about the nature of the product, as we've been calling it, that the city provides, particularly around community services. And it just, to me, highlights that community services really is the face of the city to most people who live here, who are not, involved, not watching the meeting, not really paying attention to what the city is doing. What they see are parades and Mount Wilson Trail events and wisteria festivals and all of those things. And I just want people to realize that at the core of what we do, to Councilmember Goss's point of view point was that we need to be responsive to you, but at the core of what we do, we have to keep you safe, and that is water, police, fire, and that is what we will have to do as our charter, the demand on the city services and our job here is to keep us safe. And without having that revenue source that everybody has mentioned tonight, the cuts are going to keep coming, and these are the types of things that are going to continue, because we are going to have to maintain that public safety aspect of what we provide to the city. But it's going to be unfortunate, because that's unfortunately not what people see and not what people attribute this, the quality of life in this town. So I just want to make that plea, and I want to thank all of the staff for making, deep cuts in a way that, in their mind, reduces their services to the community, and, curtails the progress that they want to make. It's not just a matter of cutting back what we're already doing. I mean, so many people who work in this city work here because they want to provide additional services and additional programs and additional benefits to our community. And not only are they not able to do those things, which makes them excited to come to work, makes them work for less than they might in another city, but we're now saying that they even have to curtail what they're providing already. So I just want to emphasize the seriousness of this, and the sacrifice that our staff makes pretty much every day in having to deal with the structural revenue issues that we have in the city. And so anyway, I don't mean to end on a bad note, but I just want to make sure that people are aware of sort of the severity and the seriousness of this issue, and the seriousness with which this council is taking this issue, because we certainly don't want, we've enjoyed a surplus a couple of years ago, and that was great, and now we are tasked with facing a deficit, and we're taking that seriously as well. On that note.
Discussion item.
Yes. So our last item on the agenda is a discussion item related to our ordinance discussion at our last meeting. I think Senior Planner Wolf is going to present.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Krebs, Mayor Pro Tem Parkhurst, and honorable members of City Council. As you see today on tonight's agenda, the second reading of the ordinance 1470 is a discussion item, and normally it appears on the agenda as a consent item. But why it's under discussion today is because staff is recommending continuance with a reintroduction of the first reading on a basis of reintroducing other findings necessary for approvals of temporary use permits. And I'll bullet point the explanation in that. So when City Council introduced the first reading of Ordinance 1470, it approved it with a number of modifications, which included temporary use permit increase in frequency from 1 temporary use permit in a non-commercial area to 2 per year. And then when City Council questioned staff whether doing so would have any implications, I incorrectly stated that there would not be any implications. And then let me explain that part. During the March 21st meeting of the Planning Commission, a discussion was held on how to implement the direction provided by City Council to amend the temporary use permit regulations. The Planning Commission formed a 2-member subcommittee with the purpose to draft amendments for review by the Planning Commission. The subcommittee operated under the assumption that the current limitation of 4 temporary use permits per year would be maintained, and as such drafted amendments that included findings for approval for more than 1 subsequent temporary use permit within a year for the non-commercial areas. In its draft notes, however, the subcommittee did request the Planning Commission to discuss whether reducing the limit from 4 to 1 would be appropriate. And then during the April 18th meeting of the Planning Commission, the draft amendments of the subcommittee were reviewed. The Planning Commission elected to reduce the number from 4 to 1 and eliminated multiple findings pertaining to approval of a temporary use permit, subsequently more than 1 per year. So in order to reintroduce those findings for Ordinance 1470, it will be required to reintroduce it for first reading before the City Council at the next available meeting. Staff is currently working to amend and kind of reform some of those findings that were deleted. During the April 18th Planning Commission meeting, it was discussed to have those findings amended should multiple temporary use permits be maintained. That concludes my report.
Any questions? Any questions for Senior Planner Wolf?
Do we have a date when we have to, is it a date certain, date uncertain?
So it will be re-noticed in the Mountain Views newspaper, but it is currently penciled into June 25th.
Would the recommendation from the planning staff be to continue it to that date, or would the planning staff prefer the flexibility of a date uncertain, given that the renotice will have to be done either way?
Since renotice will be done either way, there's no action needed tonight.
Okay. All right, so I will, if no other questions, I will open it up for public comment.
No speaker cards, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Council discussion?
Very clear.
Yes. Okay. I don't think we need action then, if you want to just bring it back at the time that makes sense. Mr. City Manager.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I was looking at our agenda. Can you repeat that?
I'm just saying, I don't think we need to take actual action, if you want to bring it back to a date, uncertain. So just whenever it makes sense in the schedule.
Thank you.
Okay, any future agenda items? I feel like I heard one earlier.
So I had asked for an update on bears, and we got one via email. And I know that there's some meetings going on. Mr. City Manager, does it make sense to have a presentation kind of encapsulating everything together? I think the statistics we got from the police department are very important. I think it's to be something that we should put in the public record. Plus, I know that you have ongoing efforts with Fish and Wildlife and our elected representatives to try to help get resources for the city. Is there a time frame that we can have to put that? Is there an appropriate time frame to have it on? Because we're seeing an increase in events as the bears are waking up.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I do have meetings scheduled with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and also with Assemblymember Holden, who wants to hear from us to get an update on our situation here in Sierra Madre related to bears. This week, we still have some unfinished business that we need to bring back to council, and our management analyst Carlson is working closely with Fish and Wildlife to finalize that wildlife management plan update. Once that's complete, and again, I have a meeting with them tomorrow. It's going to be a priority for me to have them complete that, because that is really the basis for some of the next steps that we're going to take in working with our community to create a wildlife watch group. Well, they'll be like our community
Neighborhood watch.
And there'll be force multipliers to help educate our residents on reducing bear attractants and bear proofing their homes. So there are some, we do need to come back to council, and as soon as we have that final step from Fish and Wildlife, we'll bring it back and we'll recap everything that we've done.
Wonderful, thank you.
Councilmember Goss, I think you might have mentioned a potential future item when you were giving your update on your, the report from the Insurance Commissioner's Office.
Oh, fire,
Hardening.
no, what's the term?
Fireside Council or no?
Hold on.
No, it was fire safe, fire-wise.
Firewise community, and we need to have a fire safe council before we can have a firewise community. We do have
That's part of the fire-wise.
Can we talk about it in a future meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that would
Might
be
make
I mean,
sense to,
agendized vote.
maybe in conjunction, does that make sense to have it in conjunction with the fire department general plan? Is that, do we anticipate that these kinds of things are gonna be part of the general plan?
So on our meeting with CAL FIRE, that was their recommendation.
Right.
And it has to be community
Yeah.
based and not.
No, understood, but I just didn't know if this type of thing was part of the master plan or not, or this is separate.
I think that this is separate for that reason, but I can provide the council and the community with an update, and maybe our fire chief can expand a little bit. So we did have those meetings with CAL FIRE and with LA County.
So I just want to be careful. We probably shouldn't be entering into discussion on it, should we?
No.
Other than putting it on
No,
the
we want
agenda?
an agenda item presentation, in other words, and discussion of it, yeah.
We can do that.
Anything else? Okay, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion adjourned. I'm sorry, meeting adjourned. Dude.
I don't know, adjourned.